Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board's meeting of November the 4th, 2019. The meeting is now open. It's 6:05 p.m. and we're going to have the invocation by Ms. Hadian, followed by the flag salute by Mr. Rizzotti.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this day and the many blessings we have received. As this meeting begins this evening, I pray for each person here. Give us listening ears and thoughtful words. Give us presence of mind and an open heart. Amen.
Please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the time and place for the hearing on project number 17 dash, am I too? Yes. Oh. Roll call, please.
Sure. Board Member Liu,
Present.
Board Member Gamboa,
Present.
Board Member Hadian,
Present.
Vice Chair Rizzotti,
I am here.
Chair Atakinian.
Present.
All the board members are present.
Are there any announcements?
There are none.
This is the time and place for the hearing on project number 17-0001265. Consideration of a resolution of the Planning Board of the City of Burbank recommending City Council approve a resolution certifying the final environmental impact report, approving the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program with statement of overriding considerations and findings of fact, approving an amendment to the Burbank Center Plan Land Use Designation, Development Review, tentative track map number 74896, adoption of an ordinance providing for plan development number 17-01, and 10-year development agreement with related entitlements for the plan development 777 North Front Street project, as I've indicated, project number 17-000125. Before we begin, do any planning board members have any conflict of interest?
No. No.
No.
No.
No. Have any planning members have any communications, including written or oral, with any person regarding this matter?
No.
No.
Just from the special meeting, aside from the special meeting on
Yeah,
Saturday.
for the record, there was a special meeting of the planning board open to the public and properly agendized and noticed in conformance with the Brown Act on Saturday, November the 2nd. 4 out of 5 board members were present, as was the applicant and members of the community. Those are not separate communications.
Then no.
Board member Atakanian, I had a conversation briefly with Kate Spear from Unite LA, a phone conversation asking to meet about this project. I declined to meet based on past experience and advice from our city attorney that it's best not to meet with applicants and members of the public before hearings. So that's just to disclose that conversation.
Mr. Ramirez, have the notices as required by law been given?
Yes, they have.
Do we have the complete file of exhibits, correspondence, and other documents?
In addition to the agenda packet that was provided to all board members, there were a couple of handouts, letters that have been placed in front of your seating areas. There's a letter from the developer's attorney. There's another letter to attention to the board, and that is from Emily Weisberg, as well as notification from the Department of Transportation response on the environmental document, and then also a email from Eric Kristen that was included through Granicus through the city's web portal. And that's the entire record.
Thank you. Will the representative of the Community Development Department please introduce yourself and summarize the matter for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair Atukanian and Planning Board members. I am Leonard Boucher, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. I will be giving the presentation on the project before you this evening. Here with me tonight are my colleagues from the Planning and Transportation Divisions, as well as members of the consultant team that helped prepare the Environmental Impact Report and associated technical studies. In addition, several members of the Laterra Development Team, the project's applicant, are here as well. Please bring up the presentation. So the applicant proposes to construct a residential, retail, and hotel buildings on a project site that is approximately 7.11 acres and consists of the following. One 7-story residential building consisting of 252 units, one 8-story residential building consisting of 321 units, 1,067 square feet of commercial retail space, one 7-story building containing 307 hotel rooms, an integrated parking facility that would include 1,168 parking spaces in total, a development of approximately 27,800 square feet of publicly accessible open space on a city-owned property that's adjacent to the site. That also includes a pedestrian connection to the Magnolia Boulevard overpass and improvements to the Front Street right-of-way frontage, including 21 feet of parkway containing sidewalks, landscaping, and bicycle lanes. In order to facilitate the project, the applicant needs to obtain the following entitlements: an amendment to the Burbank Center Plan to change the current land use designation from mixed-use commercial, office, industrial to mixed-use commercial, office, residential, and the sub-area designation from City Center West Ritzy corridor to the City Center West East Side and portions of West Side of Victory Boulevard and South Side of Burbank Boulevard. And just to clarify, the Ritzy corridor is the transportation, the Metrolink station. They're also asking for a rezone of the project site from AD auto dealership to planned development, a 10-year development agreement inclusive of conditions of approval, a tentative tract map to create 4 parcels and 10 airspace lots, development review, and the certification of an EIR, adoption of the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and statement of overriding consideration and findings. Now I'll give you a little bit of background on the project location. The project site is a vacant, approximately 7.11 acre site located at 777 North Front Street and bounded by East Burbank Boulevard to the north, Magnolia Boulevard overpass to the south, the Interstate 5 freeway to the east, and North Front Street to the west. The project site is surrounded on all sides by a variety of uses, including industrial manufacturing, city utilities, and commercial service and retail uses. The site was formerly home to General Water Company and the Zero Corporation, 2 businesses that manufactured water heaters and metal cases respectively. The manufacturing uses ceased operation in 1991, and the Ford Leasing Development Corporation and Galpin Ford purchased the site with the intention of constructing a new car dealership. The new car dealership was never constructed, and the site has remained vacant since 1991. And in 2004, all buildings were demolished, leaving only the foundation slabs on the site. The site is currently being used as construction material storage for the I-5 improvement project and occasionally for temporary recreational entertainment, including circuses, carnivals, and equestrian shows. And we seem to be having some technical difficulties. Just hang on with us. Trying to get it to the presentation is frozen. All right. The general plan land use designation of the site is downtown commercial. The downtown Burbank is a civic pride, dining, and entertainment center of the city and is also a major employment center. The area has direct and convenient access to public transit, including buses and trains, and the compact nature of the street grid facilitates walking and easy pedestrian access. The project would be consistent with this general plan designation and would implement numerous general plan policies. The project is also located within the Burbank Center Plan, or BCP area, and the BCP identifies the land use designations of the project site as part of the mixed commercial, office, industrial, and part of the City Center West Ritzy corridor, which looks to retain established industry and encourage the placement of new mixed-use commercial, office, and industrial land uses. The current BCP designation does not allow for residential development on the project site. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the Burbank Center Plan to address this issue. So the maps here on the slide would show the proposed land use designation and sub-area designation that the applicant wishes to approve this evening. This would be in order to allow the development of residential units consistent with the city general plan housing production goals and the land use designation of Burbank Center, downtown commercial. The project applicant is proposing to amend the Burbank Center Plan by changing the primary land use designation from mixed commercial office industrial to mixed commercial office residential, and the sub-area land designation of the project site from City Center West Ritzy Corridor to City Center West East Side and portions of West Side of Victory Boulevard and South Side of Burbank Boulevard. The amendment to the BCP would allow the project to implement numerous Burbank Center Plan policies adopted in 1997 and envisions an expanded downtown area to the western side of I-5. The project site would be consistent with the mixed commercial office residential by encouraging the recycling of vacant or obsolete property with mixed-use development. And the Burbank 2035 General Plan Commercial Land Use Designation, which encourages the development of residential and commercial uses in the downtown area. This map shows the current zoning designation of the property, which is AD, or auto dealership, and allows for the development of automobile dealerships selling new cars. Residential uses are not allowed in this zoning designation. The applicant is requesting to rezone the entire project site to the planned development, or PD zone. So the proposed project would rezone the entire project site to the planned development PD zone because the AD zone referred to the BCC 3 zone for development standards and the R4 zone for residential standards. The project was reviewed for consistency with the development standards of those zones. In general, the proposed project is not consistent with the BCC 3 and the R4 standards in the following areas: building heights, landscaping requirements, lot coverage and lot depth, fence and wall requirements, and private open space. The proposed zoning designation would allow the project to deviate from the standards of the BCC 3 and the R4 zones and is intended as an alternate process to accommodate unique developments for residential, commercial, professional, or other similar activities, including combinations of uses and modified development standards that would create a desirable, functional, and community environment under controlled conditions of a development plan. The proposed project will implement this provision of the code. With regards to parking compliance, and in order to provide deed-restricted affordable units to moderate-income households, which provide new opportunities for affordable workforce housing that helps the city meet its regional housing needs assessment, allocation, and number, and to encourage the use of public transportation, the applicant is proposing to implement a parking ratio for the residential units that is consistent with the city and state density bonus regulations. So the table here shows the parking that would be provided under those density housing regulations. So for the studio units, they're proposing 1 space per unit, which would be a total of 114 spaces. For the 1-bedroom units, it would be 1 space per unit for a total of 245 spaces. The 2-bedroom units would be 2 2 spaces per unit, which would be 360 unit spaces, and the 3-bedroom units would be provided 2 spaces per unit, which would be 70 spaces in total. The applicant is also proposing 70 guest parking spaces, and for the hotel rooms and the retail parking, the applicant is proposing 307 parking spaces for the hotel and 4 spaces for the retail, which would give you a total of 1,168 spaces. I should note here that the applicant is only requesting the use of the reduced parking requirements for the residential portion, and the hotel and the retail will be parked according to code. Staff reviewed the project and determined that it complies with the city's inclusionary housing requirements for mixed-use development rental housing. I will now provide some context as to how it meets these requirements. Inclusionary regulations were adopted in 2006 for the city, and they required 15% proposed units to be deed restricted for very low or moderate income households. As part of these regulations, the developers can pay a fee in lieu, provide a land donation, or propose the units off-site. The inclusionary regulations for rental units were suspended from 2009 through January 2018 as a result of the Palmer case. AB 1505, the Palmer Fix, allowed cities to apply inclusionary regulations to rental units. The project was deemed complete prior to the Palmer Fix, so it did not initially include any affordable units. The city negotiated with the applicant and as part of a community public benefit that was equal to 12% or 69 units of the total project units to be deed restricted as affordable to moderate income households in lieu of the in lieu fee. In order to maintain affordability and facilitate project development, the 69 affordable units are being proposed as micro units, and the proposed affordable units can be used to meet the RENA allocation for moderate income units for the city. The project is also consistent with the city's current greenhouse gas reduction plan by incorporating the following project design features that result in pedestrian-friendly infill development, energy-efficient construction that collectively reinforces our greenhouse reduction plan emission reduction strategies. Those measures include future construction to meet 2019 California Building and Energy Codes and the Cal Green Code, the provision of EV charging, cool roofs, and rooftop solar panels, use of Energy Star appliances and water conservation measures, including the use of recycled water for irrigation and HVAC purposes, compliance with the city's low-impact development ordinance and best management practices, ongoing compliance with construction waste, food waste, and green waste diversion, construction to meet LEED Gold certification, implementation of the city's complete street infrastructure, including bicycle and pedestrian amenities, and participation in the Burbank Transportation Management Organization, and public benefits that include funding for maintenance of Metrolink station and Burbank bus infrastructure, and a transit subsidy of up to 80% of the cost for a monthly Metrolink or Metro Pass for up to 20% of the future residents and employees. Building and maintaining This would also include building and maintaining an elevator or a staircase to facilitate greater access to the downtown Metrolink station from the Magnolia Street overpass. The slide here shows the tentative track map that the applicant proposes. It will be to subdivide the project site into 4 parcels and will also include a condominium map that would create 10 airspace lots. The residential and hotel uses will be on separate lots. The tentative track map also shows land that will be both dedicated to the city and acquired from the city by the developer. Prior to the approval of the final map, the city will review and approve code covenants and restrictions for the future owners association. As part of the entitlements before you this evening, the applicant also wishes to enter into a development agreement. The proposed term of the development agreement is 10 years, and the conditions of approval and standard requirements recommended by city departments are included as conditions of approval in the DA. In addition, the mitigation measures as specified in the MMRP and the project design features described in the EIR are also included as conditions of approval in the DA. The DA also lists the required public benefits and the permitted and conditionally permitted uses. The project proposes about $33.6 million in public benefits, including fair share contributions towards maintenance, safety, and operations of the downtown Metrolink station and the Burbank bus, fire department and library improvements, future pedestrian bicycle connection to the downtown Metrolink station. Physical improvements would include 21 feet of parkway on Front Street for bicycle lanes, sidewalks, landscaping, and street furniture, a sound wall between the project site and the Interstate 5 freeway, approximately 27,800 square feet of new publicly accessible open space, a vertical public pedestrian public access connection from Magnolia Boulevard overpass to the site, and over 80 new trees on site and on adjacent public streets. On-site transit improvements include membership in the Burbank Transportation Management Organization, bicycle and pedestrian connection to the downtown Metrolink station, participation in transportation demand strategies, and an 80% TAP Pass subsidy for 20% of employees in the new development, and also the residents. So this slide here shows you an illustrative site plan. This shows you that the site is, although it is considered 3 separate buildings, it is connected with parking in between. This site plan also gives you an idea of the improvements that will be made to the Front Street area. You can see that there will be new landscaping that will be provided throughout the site. And also on the right of the picture, you'll see the new concept for the publicly accessible open space that would be built adjacent to the Magnolia Boulevard overpass. So this site plan here just shows you the breakup of the buildings. Starting on your left, you have residential building 1. In the middle of that, you have a parking structure that has a rooftop open space area. And then you have residential building number 2. And then you have the hotel towards the right of the picture. You also see that the applicant is proposing 6 smaller courtyard areas for open space to the project, as well as a rooftop open space for the hotel, and also an area above the podium level, which will have the swimming pool and other features of the project. This slide here just gives you a sense of the design that the applicant is choosing to use for the project. It consists of a modern or contemporary style. Materials include the use of concrete, the use of wood siding, the use of metals, and colors that are complementary. The applicant uses the courtyards, uses balconies, building overhangs, and flat roofs to provide articulation. And you can see that the areas where you see the green screening, or areas where they're proposing landscaping vines to be put on the side of the building, are actually the areas that the parking will be, and it serves as a feature to screen the parking from public view. This is a rendering of the residential portion of the buildings. Again, you can see to the right of the picture, the parking areas will be screened so that they look like they're part of the building. The same design that's used for the residential portion of the building will also be used for the hotel portion. The hotel portion will feature complementary colors and complementary materials in a style that makes the hotel stand out as a separate part, yet consistent with the larger development. And then again, this is just a rendering of the hotel. You can see in the picture to the right, part of the publicly accessible open space, and also the improvements to Front Street. The project also contains a very small retail component. This will be done in the form of a retail gallery. This gallery will be accessible from the Front Street just south of the Burbank Boulevard interchange, and will be used for a small retail use, and will also serve as a pedestrian connection to the project from that corner. The city determined that an environmental impact report needed to be prepared for the project. The EIR has been prepared in accordance with state and CEQA guidelines. Specifically, the draft EIR evaluates the environmental effects that could result from implementation of the project. Project design features and mitigation measures are identified in the draft EIR that will reduce most of the impacts of the project to a less than significant level. The EIR determined there were significant and unavoidable impacts to transportation and traffic. With regards to the significant and unavoidable issues with transportation and traffic, a total of 24 intersections were studied as part of the overall study for the project. Project significant impacts were identified at 2 study intersections under the existing plus project conditions and 4 study intersections, including the 2 identified under the existing plus project, under the future plus project conditions. Of those identified, 2 intersections with the existing plus project conditions resulted in significant and unavoidable impacts, with the same 2 intersections under the future plus project conditions resulting in significant and unavoidable impacts as well. The impacts are either unachievable due to the fact that potential mitigation is not achievable based on the city's screening analysis for improvements, or the potential mitigations for impacted intersections are out of the city's jurisdiction and cannot be implemented. The table here shows the 2 intersections. First one is intersection number 9, which is the I-5 southbound off-ramp, Front Street and Burbank Boulevard. There is a partial mitigation that was proposed for this off-ramp, but because a portion of the intersection is a Caltrans right-of-way, we cannot mitigate that impact. And then the second intersection is the intersection number 10, which is a Victory Place and Burbank Boulevard. As a result of the transportation and traffic significant unavoidable impacts, a statement of overriding considerations and findings of fact has been prepared for your review. As part of that statement of overriding considerations, and despite the transportation and traffic impacts, the project offers the following public benefits. So number 1 would be redevelopment of an underutilized former brownfield site, would provide 573 housing units, including 69 affordable units, would support local businesses in the city by providing a needed 307-room hotel, would develop and maintain for the life of the project an approximately 27,800 square foot publicly accessible open space area that can be used for public events, would construct and maintain a vertical and public pedestrian access elevator and staircase between North Front Street and the south side of Magnolia Boulevard, overpass for the project, would result in significant investment in green infrastructure, solar and EV charging stations, and green building designs, would create short-term and long-term employment opportunities, would include green power, which also includes the solar photovoltaic, investment in bike and pedestrian amenities with the site and adjacent public right-of-way, and upgrades to utility and street infrastructure. And the proposed development will also result in the future property, sales, and transient occupancy taxes, and an overall investment in public benefits, as noted previously, would be roughly $33.6 million. Before we make a recommendation to the planning board, I do have a few issues that I want to read into the record with regards to changes to both the development agreement and the resolution. So first, I believe you all have a copy of the memo that highlights the changes to the development agreement. So I will go ahead and read into the record on page 2, I'm sorry, on is it B9, sorry. On B9, the paragraph that ends with, to the extent such conflicts do occur, the project shall be deemed a legal non-conforming use. We want to strike that sentence from the DA. And then also on page B10, at the very top, the sentence that ends with, other than the dedication set forth in the conditions of approval, we would add an S to dedication, so it would read dedication set forth in the conditions of approval. And then on page B93, condition of approval, number 272, the new condition of approval would read, applicant to submit off-site improvement plans in Burbank standard format prior to the issuance of the building permit. The applicant must coordinate with Public Works to establish a professional service agreement, PSA, for engineering, support, project management, and inspection services to oversee any related public works construction in the public right-of-way or within the public utility easements related to this project. The cost of the PSA will be paid by the applicant. And then we also have two changes to the resolution. These are just really minor edits. So on page A10, in the paragraph that's titled Findings for Development Review, we would ask that the project number be changed from 16-0004646 to project number 17-0001265. And then on page A11, the paragraph towards the bottom of the page, where it says park, we would want to change that to say the open space and elevator will be maintained by the applicant for a span of 55 years. And then that next sentence would also read, the open space will provide open space for the project and surrounding uses, while the elevator with integrated staircase will improve connections between the downtown, the project site. So with those changes read into the record, staff recommends that the planning board adopt a resolution that the planning board recommending city council, that the planning board recommends city council approval of a resolution certifying the final environmental impact, approving the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program with the statement of overriding considerations and findings of fact, approving an amendment to the Burbank Center Plan land use designation, development review, tentative track map number 74896, adoption of an ordinance providing for a plan development number 17-1265, and a 10-year development agreement with related entitlements for the plan development at 777 North Front Street, the project number 17-0001265. With that, this concludes my presentation, and staff, the applicant, are available for questions should the board have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we open up the hearing to the public, I would like to invite the project applicant or their representative to address the planning board. You will have a maximum time of 15 minutes to make your presentation.
Good evening. I'm Charlie Turtelot, and I'm president of Laterra Development Company. And we're a Los Angeles-based family-owned development company. And tonight, I'm joined by my presentation team, who will describe some of the many facets of this important project that's before you for consideration tonight. And there they are. In order to provide some perspective on the design process for this project, I wanted to take you back through just a quick history of this. So we started 3.5 years ago, and it sounds like a long time, and it is. We began with really a single 500-unit apartment building. And that building didn't have any connections. It had no public benefits really to speak of, and had no affordable housing. None of the features that you're going to see coming up here in the presentation. So that was the beginning of this thing 3.5 years ago. So it's really come a long way since then, and it's evolved really to get to where we are today by really a few different ways. So, you guys know how the process works at the city, but I'll remind you that you have a great process here. We start with a pre-development meeting at the city. We meet with the departments. They give us feedback. We go out and we meet with the stakeholders. We go through multiple design versions of the project. This thing's been through so many design versions I can't remember how many. So a lot. And where we are today reflects really the input that we've gotten from staff, from politicians, from business groups, from resident groups, and we've ended up with the finished and final design that reflects all of that. So we're proud of it, and we're going to show this to you. So our mission really was to create the right project. We listened, we heard, and we created. So the finished product, we believe, adds a quality of life, connects downtown Burbank to employment centers and businesses, and to the Metrolink station. Tonight, we're going to demonstrate the comprehensive public and community benefits and tax benefits this project brings. But first, we're going to begin with a description of the extensive community outreach program that was tailored designed for this project. And here to explain that is Renee Scalacci from the advocacy group. Renee.
Thank you, Charlie. The past few years, we've done extensive outreach. It was very important to Latera and to the team that this be a collaborative and transparent process from the beginning. We shared the project with our abutting neighbors, over 75 neighboring downtown merchants, hundreds in the Burbank community. We have project support from abutting property owners, employees, local organizations. We hosted a project website to provide updates to the public about the project, where we were in the process, as well as to provide access to our team to answer any questions that the public may have through this process. Latera has been a very active player and participant in Burbank, and it takes a community to build a community. We have many supporters, but I'll just highlight a few for you. We have the Burbank Chamber of Commerce, the Burbank Housing Corporation, and the Downtown Burbank Partnership. This is truly a community process. With that, and that's just to name a few supporters, with that I'd like to introduce Chris Tortolat. He's Latera's Director of Development. Thank you.
Hi. The 8-acre site has been dormant since 1992. It's bordered by Burbank Boulevard to the north and Magnolia Boulevard to the south. It's across from the Burbank Town Center and near the Burbank Metrolink station. So in designing this project, there were really three guiding principles that we kept in mind throughout the process. The first is connectivity. We're going to build a transit plaza with an elevator and stair connection to Magnolia Boulevard, connecting downtown Burbank to the Metrolink station. We'll have a connection to Burbank Boulevard. Lastly, we'll have pedestrian and bike connections from our site to the Metrolink station. The second guiding principle that we kept in mind is sustainability. Our project will be LEED Gold. There's a variety of sustainable design features that you'll hear throughout the presentation tonight. And then lastly, we're not just building a project, we're creating a neighborhood. There are many reasons why we like this site, but I'm going to touch on just a few. The first is that it's big, so we can bring significant, much-needed housing to the city of Burbank. The second is that we're next to a transit stop, so this is truly a transit-oriented development. It's a TOD site. The third is there's no residential adjacencies, so the construction impacts will be minimal. We're not displacing anybody, and as you can see from the existing site conditions, well, there's a lot of room for improvement on the site. So I'm going to hand it off to our architect, Richard Solaris, at Urban Architecture Lab. He's a great and well-known architect in LA, and he's going to walk you through the design.
Thank you, Clarisse. Thank you, planning board members. So creating a neighborhood requires a variety of uses. So to that end, our project includes 573 residential units, of which 69 are affordable, 307 hotel rooms, and the hotel will include a bar, restaurant, pool area, meeting rooms, all available to both residents and the public. Also a public transit plaza and a multifunctional gallery space. We've created a video to give you a better feel for the project, which we'll show you now. So one of the important features of the project is our publicly accessible open space. Here's an image of that, a conceptual rendering, and the open space will include both landscape and hardscape areas, lots of trees for shade, seating, and lighting throughout. Another important feature of this open space is our vertical connection to the Magnolia Bridge overpass. Next slide, please. So this feature will include both elevator and stair access to the Magnolia Bridge, and we've actually set it apart from the overpass to account for future widening, which we're not sure exactly how wide that will be, but it's accounted for by a bridge connection. Next slide. And then going down to Front Street from the overpass, we are extending the sidewalks and bike path into a illuminated crosswalk and then extending it further along Front Street to the metro station, which you can see here in this slide. Next slide. And then along the north end of the property is our multifunction gallery space and Bridge Plaza, which is connecting our third floor of our residential building to the Burbank overpass at Front Street to allow a seamless connection between the property and downtown Burbank. And so connectivity is very important in this project, but so is sustainability. And to speak more about the sustainability features is Hunter Weaver, the principal project manager from Laterra.
Thanks, everyone. I'm excited to walk you through some of our green building features and sound reducing features that we've selected for our project. So first of all, as Leonard mentioned, the project will be LEED Gold certified, and we've also added the WELL certification, which focuses on indoor well-being and occupant health. Secondly, we're going to include rooftop solar panels and multiple electrical vehicle charging stations. The high-efficiency HVAC systems will also be filtered using a rating of MERV 13 or greater filters. And also, there's a number of water-reducing features such as low-flow plumbing fixtures, drought-tolerant landscape, and recycled water use for irrigation purposes. This is a cross-section of our project where you can see some of the multiple sound-reducing features that we've implemented. So first of all, our building is set back approximately 30 feet from the Interstate 5 freeway, and immediately at the freeway is a minimum of a 10-foot sound wall that will be constructed the entire length of the site from Burbank Boulevard to Magnolia. At some locations, the sound wall can reach up to 30 feet because of the Caltrans on-ramp that's currently being constructed. Also, the building envelope will feature high-performance glazing and enhanced construction materials to reduce sound. And you can also see that our public open space, or not public open space, our open space courtyards are oriented away from the freeway, so you have the benefit of the building to act as a sound buffer. The rooftop amenity deck, and as well as the podium level courtyards, will feature plexiglass sound barriers to reduce sound, but to preserve the views, especially the great views of the mountains in the distance.
I'm going to talk about the project public and community benefits. So our project will provide 5% of the 12,000 units in the city's 15-year goal. 12,000 units in 15 years, by the way, is 800 units a year. So 573 units is 73% of a single year of Burbank's housing goals. We'll provide close to $34 million in public benefits, including 69 affordable units, which is 15% of the RENA figures for Burbank for moderate income units. We'll make contributions to transportation improvements, public library, parks and recreation, police and fire. We'll have new public open space, transit connections with ongoing maintenance, funding for public transportation uses, and a sound wall. Our project will provide over 2,200 new jobs, $5 million in annual recurring city tax revenues, plus $1.35 million in hotel TOT taxes every year, $2.75 million in school fees to the Burbank Unified School District will be created, plus $1.3 million in annual recurring funding. We'll pay $6.8 million in permits and fees to the city of Burbank. Overall, this is a $300 million total project investment into Burbank.
What you have seen tonight is the finishing result material investments and commitments of time and effort to forge an entirely new community, but also to enhance an existing community within the city of Burbank that provides public community benefits and ongoing tax benefits. The time and effort spent by Laterra's design team, together with city staff, city legislators, businesses, residents, and all the folks that got involved, has been relentless. The input has been from many, going through multiple designs, with the mission to contribute to building Burbank into a world-class city. Now, I am both proud and enthused to ask you for your support tonight by voting yes for this project. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now open the public hearing to hear from any persons in the audience who wish to speak on this matter. Each person may address the planning board for a maximum time of 2 minutes. Has everyone completed a card who wishes to make a statement? If you haven't, you may obtain a card right at the entrance. Our first speaker is Mr. Tom Flavin.
Good evening, Chairman Atukinian and Planning Board members. With the severe housing shortage in Burbank, City Council, as you know, earlier this year, adopted a policy of providing 12,000 housing units over the next 15 years. This housing shortage creates many problems. Limited access to housing in Burbank, affordability issues for buyers and renters, high levels of commuter traffic, homelessness, controversies over rent control and tenant evictions, and more. This is an opportunity to mitigate many of those problems. At the same time, Sacramento is threatening to preempt city control over local housing development. This is an opportunity to demonstrate to the state that Burbank is serious about solving its housing problem. According to city studies, over 128,000 people commute to and from Burbank every day because of their job. This is an opportunity to address the infrastructure and environmental stress associated with that level of commuter traffic. We also know that the city has $800 million in unfunded general fund liabilities to address over the next 20 years. This project produces $5 million annually in new general fund revenues. That's $100 million in the next 20 years. This is a great opportunity to impact that fiscal problem without asking for new taxes. With the enhanced connectivity built with this project, the residents and visitors of it can also access downtown. And this is an opportunity to strengthen one of our major economic centers. So with those benefits for the project, the Chamber Board unanimously supports this project and requests that you support its moving forward to the City Council. Thank you.
Next is Brett Warner.
Thank you, Planning Board, and your commitment to Burbank. I was born in Burbank, St. Joseph, 1960, and raised my kids here and made Burbank my home for most of my life. I have served in many capacities in Burbank, including Chamber President in the year 2000, quite a few years ago, and a board member of the PBID downtown, but my capacity here tonight is probably more personal because I've managed and owned real estate in the downtown Burbank right now. So it's always been a passion, obviously an interest to take a look at what's happening in Burbank. I love the town. It's a conservative town. That's good and bad sometimes because we do have an imbalance of work-related jobs and the capacity of housing. We've had it for quite some time. And so when I measure downtown Burbank and its potential success, it's really been a very delicate balance because it lives in an area that is conservative. We definitely need a new resident in Burbank to help the downtown Burbank thrive because it is a very delicate balance, and it's been that way for as long as I can remember, to tell you the truth. So the housing that's being discussed today and maybe to follow in the next couple of years will provide obviously 2,000 or 3,000 units downtown that is not only necessary to the corridor, but the downtown Burbank and its survival. We've spent a lot of money, we've spent a lot of activity to see that the downtown thrives as much as we possibly can, but it doesn't happen by itself. And we've seen surrounding communities, Pasadena and Glendale survive, and we could be doing the same thing here by the housing inclusion downtown Burbank. Thank you.
Next is Chris Schaefer. Okay. Sorry. Next is Joshua Christensen. Going twice. Jared Langford. Mitch Katz. Kate Spear.
Good evening, board members. My name is Kate Spear. I'm here speaking on behalf of Unite Here Local 11, the Hospitality Workers Union. As many of you know, I've been here before. We represent approximately 31,000 workers across the Southern California and Arizona regions, including approximately 400 that live in Burbank. Our members have a direct interest in seeing that the city's land use laws are being followed, that the city satisfies its affordable housing obligations, and complies with the state's environmental laws. As such, we have significant concerns about this project. Burbank clearly is in the midst of a housing crisis and the city needs more housing. However, the type of housing being proposed is a significant component of this conversation and of our efforts to address our housing crisis. Burbank has to aggressively pursue low-income housing development if it hopes to come close to achieving its RHNA goals. This project, while it does provide housing, does not provide any low or very low-income units. The project only proposes 69 units at the moderate income level, rendering the residential units potentially inaccessible to a single person making less than $58,450 per year. I personally don't come close to accessing the affordable units included in this development. In a city that has a jobs to housing imbalance of 3.5, we must prioritize making Burbank accessible to low-income individuals and families. And while it's tempting to delegate the issue elsewhere to other projects that may or may not be coming down the pipeline, there's no better time to start addressing affordability in Burbank than now with this project. We continue, additionally, to have concerns about this project's greenhouse gas or GHG impacts. The project still relies on an outdated and unenforced greenhouse gas reduction plan and regional plans such as the California Air Resources Board 2017 scoping plan and other regional plans, neither of which contain specific or mandatory requirements of local land use projects. We encourage the city to ensure this project's accurate analysis of GHG impacts by using the South Coast Air Quality Management District's thresholds. Thank you so much.
Charlie Tortolote. I hope I did not mispronounce your last name.
I believe I've already spoken. Oh, you pronounced it almost perfect.
Almost perfectly. How do you say it?
Tortolote.
Well, I was far off. Total lot. Okay, thank you. Renee Shilachi?
I already spoken, thank you.
Monica Zhang? You've already spoken?
My name is Monica Zhang. I'm a Burbank resident for 4 years. I'm a mother of 2 young children. One of them is in the the Burbank Unified School District, and the other one will be entering shortly. I like this project because I believe that density will help our city. Regarding the affordable component, I think we will address affordability by building more units. I believe that supply-demand factors kind of more supply will help the project, will help Burbank address some of the need for more units. And so I am in support of this project. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say Chris Tortolot has spoken. And Richard Solares has spoken. And Hunter Weaver has also spoken. Robert Todd Skaggs.
Hello and thank you, Board. I'm a part of the Labor's Union. I'm up here for Largo construction as far as concrete goes, but to give you some insight on the Labor's Union apprenticeship program, which by bringing this job to life, you'll give a lot of jobs out. I spent 17 years as assistant director. I'm a member of the Directors Guild of America, but sometimes in life things change. And for me, my wife was in a car wreck and things didn't work out so well. So I have 2 beautiful boys, though, and the story does get better. So I asked myself, what are you going to do at 50? Once my wife got hurt, we moved away. And I found out there was a labor's union apprenticeship program. So not just at 50 years old, you ask yourself after spending your life in the movie business. My last job was with AD Astra with Brad Pitt. And I had to ask myself, what are you going to do? Well, with an apprenticeship program, it gives anybody and everybody an opportunity to change direction when you didn't want to change direction. So I became a part of the apprenticeship program, taking a new leaf in life, become a weekend warrior now, which just gives you a chance to be a father. But with the projects like this, you're giving over 2,000 jobs, some to apprentices, some to journeymen, but you're giving us all a chance is for people that are changing direction and going in a new direction. So by giving this job liftoff, you're helping 2,000 or more new employees come into your work field, some of which are coming out of school and don't have a chance to go to college. And I say that because after I left the movies, I thought, what is there? There's construction, there's road work, there's building. So by bringing this project to life and giving apprenticeship program life and journeyman, I think you're doing a great thing. And I just wanted to come up and let you know that I think it's a really good thing if you can bring this up off the ground and give more jobs to people that need them in a new direction. So I thank you all very much for your time, and have a good night.
Wow, this is almost calligraphy. Jason? I can't read. Is there a Jason? I can't read the last name. Can you make it out? Can you make it out? On Rosemary Lane?
Susan Sebastian.
Susan?
Yes, not Jason.
I'm sorry. And what's your last name, Susan?
Sebastian.
Sebastian.
My legs asleep. I don't want to talk.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Sebastian. I'm representing the Boys and Girls Club of Burbank this evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. We are in favor of this project for reasons that have already been discussed this evening. We believe that it will bring new housing to the city, including market rate and affordable apartments that will be accessible to a wide range of people and that is also close to a mass transit station. We additionally believe the project will generate millions of dollars in new tax revenue to the city and create many more jobs, factors which are important to contributing to the future of the economic health of Burbank. We believe this project provides valuable benefits to the community, and we hope that the planning board agrees and that you will find this project worthwhile. And just on a personal note, we've been working with Laterra as nonprofits work with all our community partners, and we find them a wonderful fit to our city. We welcome them here, and we think they will add a benefit to all the other nonprofits that are part of their partnership. Thank you.
Did I call out Robert Todd Skaggs?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
All right. Gonzalo Ramos?
Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Gonzalo. I just wanted to tell you guys that I live right here, right off of Magnolia. I was born and raised right here, and I also am part of the Laborers Union. And I just want to tell you that you guys allowing us to have this work, it really is what makes dreams come true, because of jobs like this is the reason why I get to be able to buy my house and provide for my family. These are good paying jobs, and they mean everything to us. So, I mean, it's a world changer for your consideration. Thank you.
John Hoffman?
Good evening. My name is John Hoffman, Bethany Road, Burbank. I've been a resident for over 25 years. I too believe in the beautification of the community and have seen the property be an eyesore and a trash dump. I've seen the circus, I've seen the other uses it's had. From downtown Burbank side, it doesn't look very well. From the freeway side, it doesn't look very well. I think it's about time we did something with it. It's been like 20 years. Affordable housing, my kids live in this community. They will be looking for affordable housing, whether it's 69 units or 20 units. Those are the people that are going to be looking for those kind of things. They're young and they're needing those things. Economically, I am employed by Largo Concrete. It would give a lot of jobs and opportunities to a lot of people in this community and that deserve them. I started out in this business many years ago, opposite, not at 50, as a young man, very poor, and I've worked my way into the position that I'm in. I own a home here, and it would help the people get good paying jobs. So I'm in support of this project. Thank you.
Tim Bissell?
Hello, I'm Tim Bissell, a Burbank resident. I oppose the project as it's currently configured. We need more housing, not hotels, and the project should be reconfigured to housing only. Only 12% of the proposed housing units are set aside for moderate income residents, and none are designated for low or very low income households. New market rate housing is unaffordable to the average renter. In fact, the California Legislative Analyst's Office has determined that new construction will not be affordable to the average renter for more than 25 years. Additionally, studies show that new market rate units raise existing rents throughout the city. The 12% proposed here is far too low. At least 20% need to be set aside for moderate, low, and very low income residents. And they need to include 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units instead of the micro units that are proposed that do nothing to house families. We all know that we face a housing crisis, but we cannot simply build our way out of the problem. New construction is unaffordable for decades, fuels gentrification, displaces longtime residents, and raises existing neighborhood rents. We must build, but we need to do so in a way that does not place additional burdens on average and moderate income families. We must require that at least 20% of all new housing proposed in this project and other projects in Burbank be affordable to moderate, low, and very low income renters and families. Thank you.
Margot Rauder.
Thank you very much. I'm Margot Rauder, second VP of Political Action for the Burbank Democratic Club. And I would like to say that we need to really look at the giving ourselves the metric of an outdated report, an outdated plan that really doesn't set us up for transparency. It's a little bit misleading. If we're going to measure against a goal, we need to measure against a goal that's based on the law that's in place, SB 32, rather than the outdated plan against AB 32. So we need to look at that. I also find it a little strange that, and while I appreciate the connectivity that this project has with transit, we are building very few units that people living in will be using transit. We are building 69 units for folks at moderate incomes. These are the folks who are going to use transit. However, the 500 plus more units are going to be used by folks who probably drive luxury cars. Does that make a lot of sense? I don't think so. I would also like to echo the notion that we don't need more hotels. We have a few coming up that are new. Do we need these? I don't think we do. We need the housing. We need it now. We needed it yesterday, and we need 12,000 units. These aren't quite the right units as they are right now. And we're having a crisis, as has been mentioned before. And lastly, I would like to make sure that a sustainability coordinator is looking over the data that goes into staff reports that informs what you all are doing, because I need the data to be valid and I need it to be accountable. Thank you very much.
Sharice James.
So I've been a Burbank resident for about 60 days. I come from Brooklyn, New York, and this project mirrors New York City to me. In the fact that you're going to have people from all different incomes, all different walks of life living in the same, building, the same dwelling. I find that LA County is kind of segregated in that. So this is like a sigh of fresh air for me, because this is just going to be just something good. It's going to create jobs, going to cause a sense of community. The fact that there will be public transportation in the media capital of the country makes sense. We need to stop there because a lot of transients come here, like myself. It attracts people from other major cities, other countries that have these things there. I house veterans. I work for the Department of Veteran Affairs. I house homeless veterans. This is not a project they would want to live in anyway. So the fact that people are saying low-income families or people from low-income backgrounds, won't have an opportunity to live here, this is not a desire of that population. So I am in favor of it. I think it's needed. I think Burbank needs to catch up to other major cities in bringing more income, revenue, and more diversity in their dwellings and in their environment. Thank you. Peace and love. Yes.
Constantine Anthony.
Good evening, Planning Board. Constantine Anthony. I think we're so close on this project. We still need to make a few corrections on this. As you know, we're not in a hotel unit crisis. We're not in a micro unit crisis. We're in a housing crisis. So I would recommend we ditch the hotels. We ditch the micro units and allow the developer to build an additional 200 to 300 units of housing. And the best way to get affordable housing is to have a third-party agency like the Burbank Housing Authority come in after construction is completed and randomly select 20% of each unit to designate as a low income, a very low income, and even a few moderate income, of course, and have them do that randomly. That way it's fair to everybody, it's equitable to everybody, and anyone on low income isn't segregated in certain portions of the property. Secondly, the cost of housing is always increased when you attach a parking unit to it. So I would say that this project is prime to have a reduced of the studios and then one parking each for each of the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, and allow the developer to uncouple that parking and have it be rented out separately from your unit. So that if you, as a low-income person or moderate-income person, wants to live in the unit, but you don't want to pay the additional for parking, or pay to even own a car, you can live in this very transit adjacent location and really save on that cost, that overhead. Paying for parking, paying for your car. So that's a huge component of this. Let's reduce the amount of parking spaces available. I mean, Front Street is only one direction in both ways. So if you build parking spaces, people with cars will move there. And if you don't, people without cars will move there. And that's what we're trying to do. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Ernesto, maybe you can tell us your last name when you come to the podium.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Board members. My name is Ernesto Pantoja. I'm here on behalf of Sergio Rascon, Business Manager of Laborers Local 300. We're here to speak on behalf of our concrete contractor, Largo Concrete, who, in its great wisdom, this developer has agreed to use them. They're a great contractor. As some of our members have already stated, these guys are committed to bringing people from within the local communities, giving them a career path, for veterans, people coming back from military service whose skills don't necessarily translate into the skills needed to create careers here. We give them that hope. Like gentlemen like Gonzalo Ramos, who said, you know, we get individuals who come back to life, like Mr. Skaggs, and it's really true. People who are coming into their last chance, their last hope at redirecting their lives and creating something positive out of it. The laborers give them that opportunity. Contractors like Largo and potential projects like this. So we ask you, at the end of the day, I'm an individual. I grew up in the city of San Fernando, low-income community, to a father who was a UAW member, a mother who was a Teamster. We were a working-class family. Workforce housing isn't always a bad thing. If it wasn't for Playa Vista having workforce development housing, I probably never would have been able to have the opportunity to live on the west side. Everybody knows how expensive it is to live on the west side. And if it wasn't for those type of units, my brother and I wouldn't have been able to buy our first home. So when we have all these people talking about, yes, we need lower rent homes and things like that, that's true. But we can't obviously knock workforce housing. Gonzalo Ramos right now is driving all the way to Santa Monica. Wouldn't it be nice if he could drive 5 minutes and work on this project? That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Isn't that the goal of climate change and getting people closer to their jobs so that they don't create more pollution? That's why contractors like Largo and developments like this are important to us. Thank you.
Rogelio Reyes.
Hello and good evening, Board. My name is Rogelio Reyes. I'm a resident of the San Fernando Valley. I am also an apprentice for the Laborers Union, Local 300. I've been 2 months into my apprenticeship, and before my apprenticeship, I was a general manager for a fast food chain. I decided to make the jump because I wanted a lot more for myself, a lot more for my family, better wages, better benefits, and a safe working environment. And working with Laborers International has provided me for that. And not only working with Laborers International, but working with great union companies such as Largo Concrete, they're able to give me a foundation for a better living wage, better benefits for my family, a safe working environment, and a project like this. I'm a resident from the Valley. I live in Canoga Park, which is not too far from here. It's on the other side of the valley. Right now, I'm commuting to Inglewood. and it would mean a lot to me to commute a lot closer to my home and for my work, reduce pollution, reduce traffic, and I am in support of this. Thank you very much.
Paul Herman.
Thank you, Planning Board members. My name is Paul Herman. I am a local business owner, fairly long-time resident. I serve on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. And I want to voice my support for the Latera Development Project on Front Street. Burbank needs more housing, and is committed to increasing its housing stock by 12%, by 12,000 units in the next 15 years. I'm not in favor of rent control and believe the only way we can improve housing options and work towards achieving this 12,000 unit goal is by approving projects like this one. The Latera mixed-use project will provide 573 apartments, 12% of which will be affordable. I also think we need more hotels to serve our growing population of visitors. This design is great, and the TOT tax that will be generated is really beneficial to our city. I mean, we're looking at supplementing our general fund by about $5 million a year. Lastly, this site has been an eyesore ever since I've lived in Burbank. It's been vacant since the late 1990s, and here's an opportunity to put this land to productive use. And it's next door to public transit, which I think is fantastic. It will create housing, jobs, and revenue for the city, and will be a huge improvement over the existing dirt site that is there now. These are the kind of projects that Burbank needs going forward. I'm a big fan of this project, and I urge you to approve it. Oh, one thing I want to mention also. There's been some talk about, let's keep redesigning this project. Let's kind of go back and forth with, adding this or taking away that. I know that the developers worked with the planning department very closely for years. And I think that the city's gotten out of the developer what they need to make this a truly beneficial project for the city. Thank you very much.
It's not necessary to clap. Would the representative of the Community Development Department like to make any further comments?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of reiterate, it was brought up about possible reductions in parking, and I just wanted to clarify that the project will result in a reduction of 343 residential spaces as part of their meeting the density bonus parking requirements. And then they'll also be providing the 70 guest parking spaces. And then I also wanted to bring up, I believe last week you had an update of the greenhouse gas reduction plan presented to you. And as a result of our analysis of that plan, we're at 95% of our goal of reducing our 2010 emissions by 2020. And the portions of that greenhouse plan that have not yet been implemented, there were some ordinances that have to be revised, are conditions of approval in this project. So where that greenhouse gas plan project fell short, the project will incorporate those ordinances or those requirements as part of its conditions of approval. That's all.
Chair, if I can add just.
Yes, Mr. Ramirez.
If I can add, there was some discussion regarding the level of affordability that's being considered. I just want to reiterate, and I know Leonard Bichette, the senior planner, mentioned during the presentation that this project was under development prior to the Palmer fix, and the project was being considered as a market rate project. In light of when this particular new statute took effect, the project could have moved forward as is with a fee in lieu of. But we worked with the developer because the approach, direction we were given was we want units, not the money, because the reality of it is that the money that would have been generated by the in lieu fee would have generated 12 units of affordable, where this particular project locks in for 55 years. Moderate income units that are part of our RENA number. They are part of the affordable. I know there's some discussion that they're not very low or low, but the reality of it is that very low, low, and moderate are all deed restricted units, which we need, of every income category, we need units. So this project is not a cure-all, end all for our housing problems. It's also not the creator of our housing problems, but it is part of the solution moving forward, and that is to generate new units and to facilitate density bonus projects. You may recall recently you had a density bonus project that came to you of 46 units, and that project was appealed twice, interestingly enough. And that project included 8 units of affordable deed restricted. And those were low income and very low income units. So on one side to say we need more units, but on the other side to have a situation where even smaller infill projects are being fought because of the concern that maybe they're not in the right place. This is an opportunity to build housing in an area that does not displace housing units, and it does not impact the surrounding single-family residential neighborhoods. And for those reasons, we're recommending, as Leonard mentioned earlier, that the project should move forward. And clearly, as we go and update our inclusionary regulations and density bonus, we can look at the economic feasibility of adding more units at different income ranges. But as you're well aware, or may be aware, the state has to also review our economic study before we bump up our percentages. And those have to be validated because the concern from the state is that as you bump up the percentage, you make the projects more infeasible. As far as the amount of community benefits, I will tell you this, over the last 3 years, we've really upped the ante. A lot of the offsite improvements were not included in the project when we first went through. I think we benefited as a community with First Street Village going forward. A lot of the amenities that you see here are one-upping those when it comes to bike and ped. The open space here, we went from a 12,000 pocket park to almost 28,000 square feet of open space. And they're actually providing more monies towards different city services and facilities than the First Street project did, as good as that project was. So this is on par with the amount of amenities, actually exceeds the amenities that Avion provided by the very fact that those affordable units, because they are being deed restricted, actually have an added cost of about $19 million to the project that didn't exist when it first walked in the door. So just wanted to bring those to your attention, and we stand behind the recommendation that we've made.
Thank you, and appreciate those notes. Does the applicant or their representative wish to make any further comments? You may have a maximum time of 10 minutes.
I'll try to be brief. Good evening, honorable board members. My name is Dale Goldsmith. I'm a partner with the law firm of Armbruster Goldsmith and Delvac, representing the applicant. I'd like to touch briefly on 3 items, but first I'd like to commend both Leonard and Fred for doing a really great job in the staff report. It's extremely thorough and comprehensive, and indeed stole some of my thunder in the remarks by Fred's excellent closing remarks. Having said that, I would like to touch on 3 items. First is the amount of affordable housing. As Fred mentioned, the goalposts have changed. It's a different world today than it was 3+ years ago when the applicant first sought this project. The so-called Palmer Fix, AB 1505, has changed the ground rules. But when the project was conceived, it was underwritten based on the old rules where you could just write a check and satisfy the obligations. Despite the fact this is a big hit to the bottom line, the applicant agrees with staff that this is the right thing to do, to have on-site units rather than write a check. And as a result, we're including 12% moderate income units, and they're not micro units, they're 500 square foot studios, which are quite large for a studio. And that equates to 69 units, I believe. I looked back and I couldn't find any project in Burbank, and I looked back several years that had nearly as much affordable as a component. So this is groundbreaking, honorable board members. In addition, while we appreciate the need for affordable housing, this project is meeting a number of important public policy goals, not just affordable housing. It addresses open space, pedestrian and bicycle circulation, enhanced transit, and sustainability. This project will be LEED Gold. So we're, I think, hitting for the cycle, to use a baseball analogy, with respect to the public benefits, and the package, as Fred said, is $33.6 million, which is extremely robust and significantly more than the First Street project, which again was an excellent project in and of itself. Regarding the comment about removing the hotel,
The hotel is an important component of the project, has been from day one. It addresses the need for existing hotel rooms near downtown. It'll support businesses downtown. It's within walking distance of those downtown businesses. It'll generate significant ongoing tax revenues for the city that goes right into the general fund in the form of transient occupancy taxes. It'll also generate sales taxes, and it'll also generate revenues for the project that will help fund that robust public benefit package of $33.6 million, including the 12% affordable units for moderate income tenants. Lastly, I'd like to respond to Ms. Spear's comments regarding greenhouse gas emissions. The EIR contains an exceptionally robust analysis of the project's greenhouse gas impacts. The project is a unique project in terms of providing LEED Gold and a number of sustainability features which were touched upon previously. It is also a transit-oriented development. This is exactly the sort of housing that you want to help reduce trips, vehicle miles traveled, and the associated greenhouse gas emissions, as well as criteria pollutants. So it really meets, this is smart planning in spades. Regarding the suggestion that that the city use a SCA QMD threshold, what Ms. Spear failed to mention is it was a draft threshold. It's a decade old and it was never adopted. SCA QMD doesn't use it, never has. So to use that 10-year-old quantitative threshold, we believe is inappropriate. The EIR uses an approach that's been endorsed by the Supreme Court. It's being used by the city. It includes an extensive analysis of the project's consistency with regional plans that are intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and concludes correctly that the project will not result in any significant greenhouse gas impacts. With that, I'm available for any questions you may have. I did submit a letter with 3 rather minor changes. I think they're all self-explanatory, but I would be happy to walk through all of them or any of them or answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your consideration.
Well, at this time, does the board have any questions for staff or the applicant? Vice Chair?
Thank you. Why don't we start with staff? Could we discuss the meeting rooms at the hotel, the size, and potentially what size events could happen there?
Yes. So if you turn to sheet B1-01 in your planning packets.
Got it.
Okay, so the project is proposing 2 meeting rooms, both sized about 2,300 square feet, roughly. So it's not something that would attract large events, but it would be, sizable enough for weddings or quinceañeras or smaller events, and it would go towards the city's need for event space.
And would those meeting rooms be able to open together so you can use it in one space, or are they separate rooms?
We can check with the applicant on that, but I believe they probably would be able to open to be a larger space.
So if that was a larger space, do we have the ample parking to support
Yes,
a large wedding or?
Yes, we would have the parking to support it. It would be counted as part of the parking that's required for the hotel.
Vice Chair?
Yeah.
The architect can talk more specifics as far as the design and the accommodation, but the parking accommodation as far as the availability of parking to support the event does exist. There's been studies we've done as a city when it comes to hotels where the occupancy and utilization of the parking typically hits about 80% of the available parking. So there is both the guest availability parking that's in the same shared area as well as the underutilization of
Okay.
units. But he can talk to how it's configured.
Not necessary. I just want to make sure that we accounted for it.
Yes.
I didn't see it in the report, so I just want to just double check. My other question was for Mr. Kriski. How are you doing?
Yes, sir. Very good. Thank you.
Wanted to talk about the bridge coming down. How's that going to affect the access to this project through the years, as I don't know how long Caltrans is going to take to reconstruct the bridge. Are we only going to have one entrance in and out?
So regarding the Caltrans construction project, they've told us that the bridge demolition and reconstruction will take 14 to 18 months. That will begin shortly after the holiday season. During that time, Front Street to the north will still have access to Burbank Boulevard. It'll just be directed from Front Street to West Burbank. So it won't be like a cul-de-sac while the construction's underway. You'll still have access on both directions of Front Street. You'll just be prohibited from crossing the freeway at Burbank while the construction's underway.
So you'll be able to get out from front and onto Burbank?
Yeah, you'll make a left onto, basically an automatic left onto Burbank towards Costco. Hopefully we're even going to engineer it so that you don't even stop at a signal during that time. You'll just kind of merge into the westbound Burbank lanes heading towards 5 Points.
Okay. And those are also the intersections that are operating at a level F?
They are, they're not at level service F, but they are the impacts that we studied that couldn't be mitigated. We did account for all the new freeway construction. So when we analyzed, especially Future Plus project, we looked at the full reconfiguration of Burbank Bridge, Front Street, and the new ramps. Unfortunately, there were still unmitigated impacts at Front Street and also at 5 Points. It's a consequence of adding a lot of project traffic. That's kind of the first couple of intersections that you use leaving the project to the north. I will say that while we have a lot of connectivity to the Metrolink station through the public benefits that planning and transportation have negotiated, with the way we do traffic studies, we don't really account for the ultimate use of some of those improvements. We actually take a very conservative approach to how much bike, ped, and transit is actually being used because we want to err on the side of caution. So although you are seeing potentially significant unavoidable impacts, two of them, we think that we're offsetting that in some degree from a policy standpoint by adding all of those additional community betterments that in some way qualitatively offset those impacts. So adding the bike facility to the Metrolink station, the transit pass subsidies, those are all methods that we still want to try and kind of reduce that trip generation, even though in the study we don't quantify it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Liu?
These questions are for Leonard. Thank you for your report. Maybe I missed this, but in terms of the affordable housing, the being in place for only 55 years, why is the 55 years chosen? Is that something that's just in admin code?
It's actually, so to be qualified for the deed restriction, they need to be rental units deed restricted for a minimum of 55 years.
So
that's the industry standard, basically. To be able to
the
qualify.
industry standard, because I know that they're doing maintenance for the life of the project. We
So-
don't do life of project for this
For
type of stuff.
affordability?
The magic language often reads in perpetuity, but not less than the useful life of the improvements.
Mhm.
You can't have a perpetual obligation. It has to have some foreseeable end. Oftentimes, there's benefits to there. There are a number of other senior subsidized housing projects in the city, and often when they reach the end of life of those covenants, there are financial incentives, sometimes federal incentives for people to continue the affordability. It's really too far out in the future to forecast what will happen, but that's often what happens to deed restricted units.
I see. Thank you. And I know this was talked about at the special meeting. I just want to bring it up again in terms of the traffic that will be directing onto the bridge now with the access and the low height of the, I guess, the railings on the bridge. And I know this is not something that the applicant would be taking care of, but does the city have this in terms of safety for people walking along the bridge to address those railings?
So that's primarily a public works concern. The city has prepared feasibility analysis to retrofit the remaining bridges that cross I-5 freeway. There's federal grant fund projects that the city has been competitive in seeking, but that has been a city-sponsored project, Mr. Krisky probably has more details, but I believe to both widen the pedestrian to widen the pedestrian pathways on the side and to increase the height of the guardrails. But that's a separate independent project that the city has been working on.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure maybe hopefully it coincides just because of the increased traffic that I anticipate would happen if the project moves forward. And then just in terms of the applicant's request for changes that are in this letter, does the city have any issues with that?
We would probably have to discuss internally and would come up with a recommendation, especially for the information proposing changes in condition of approval number 258. That's something that would involve a discussion between both the Planning Division and Public Works because it affects the use of encroachments over into the right-of-way. So we're happy that the applicant has brought these issues up, and we're more than happy to discuss and come to some kind of a conclusion prior to council.
Thank you.
And just if I can add, Chair, just to the discussion on this item. Leonard correctly notes that we need to go back and check with Public Works. The one caveat is minimum height clearances from finished grade, from sidewalk up. We need to make sure that we don't create a situation where public right-of-way improvements that need to be maintained over time, we don't create conflict with the bottom of like a balcony or an architectural feature. So I think from a planning standpoint, we're fine that this has been introduced, but we would caveat to say that if this is going to be considered moving forward, that it be subject to verification with Public Works and also BWP, Burbank Water and Power, because there are other amenities, other utilities in that area, and we don't want to create a conflict. They sometimes require minimum clearances from their infrastructure, including any lights or those kind of things. So we're fine with it being proposed. I think we just need to verify the information before, and we can do that if the project does move forward with a recommendation from the board to have it considered and evaluated before it goes to council.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ramirez. Mr. Gamboa?
For staff, how much does a 500 square foot studio affordable unit go for?
In this particular case, because of the fact that it's limited to moderate income, the 2019 income and rent limits note that for a 0 or 1 bedroom, the maximum rents that can be charged is $1,407 per month. And that is inclusive of any utility allowance that has to be provided. So the reality of it is that the unit cannot rent for more than basically $1,307, accounting for a $100 allowance for the utility service. So regardless of the size, because it's deed restricted to moderate income, it would have to actually rent for that amount. On average, we did an analysis for our accessory dwelling units, and the average rents for those were $1,498 per unit, but they ranged anywhere from $1,200 on the low end all the way up to $1,980 on the high end.
In terms of the inclusionary zoning element that Mr. Leonard, I'm sorry, I forget Brochet. You did an excellent job explaining it, but I think there's it seems to be that it applies to by right projects or general just housing projects come through, correct? Like that's the intention when it was drafted, and that's partly what got struck down?
No, actually, the requirement under, and I do have the city attorney, so he can correct me if this is wrong, but my understanding is that in the Palmer case, the reason it was invalidated is that they were applying the rent restriction to rental units, which was in essence de facto rent control because it was limiting the amount of rent that could be applied to those particular units. So what the court case ended up happening is a lot of cities, what they did is they suspended the inclusionary provision of their code specifically just for rental units. We still applied it for our for sale units because that wasn't part of the case. So during that period up until January of 2018, this particular project was deemed complete early on in March of that year. And they were basically completing their environmental review. And in the process of that happening, the Palmer Fix was approved in September 29th of 2017. And we began to basically look at it and apply it to the projects in January of 2018. So we approached the developer, and I will say that the initial response from the developer was, in addition to shock, was a concern that the project basically would be dead on arrival because we'd never budgeted 19 million plus for affordable units. We were doing a market rate project. So through the process, we negotiated. We want the units. Is there a way we can basically make the project pencil out and still get units that could be deed restricted? Keeping in mind that this is not the cure-all, end-all project. So in lieu of just paying what basically they're allowed to do under our law, and actually under state law, it says you have to provide them with alternatives to building the units. They were proposing to initially to just pay the in lieu fee and be done with it and build market rate units. But we came back and worked with them so that we were able to negotiate 12% moderate income. And I will say we've done market analysis, and that range of 12% is actually consistent with our economic analysis that we'll be bringing forth to you. So that number is on point with the units that could be built. And what they actually did is to make those pencil out, consistent with what one of the speakers mentioned, is they actually had to remove parking spaces because that was also burdening the cost of the units at a rate of about $50,000 to $80,000 a parking space. So collectively with all those things, that's where we got to the point of the 12% affordable units that are moderate income.
I understand that, and see that in the report, and it's explained clearly, but it's also a site where housing's not allowed to begin with. That's partly why we're here, because they want to change the zoning to allow housing. Isn't that correct?
Correct. They want to change the underlying BCP and the zoning, but the general plan does allow for housing because it is part of the downtown commercial zone. So it would bring essentially the Burbank Center Plan and the zoning into compliance with the current general plan zoning designation.
But isn't that because it's for a car dealership right now, and doesn't the general plan say allow for just commercial and industrial?
For under the current Burbank Center Plan, there's many layers of zoning designations on the project site. So under the Burbank Center Plan, which was a plan that was adopted in 1997, about 30 years ago, at the time, the plan for that area was commercial, office, and industrial. The car dealership came in a couple years later at a time where the city wanted to try and compete with Glendale and other surrounding cities that at the time were investing into car dealership areas. The car dealership never came to fruition, and essentially the site remained vacant. From that time till now, we got the 2035 Burbank General Plan that essentially went in and changed the zoning designation under the general plan of that area and included it as part of the downtown commercial general plan designation. So essentially what we're doing is we're essentially bringing the Burbank Center Plan designation and the underlying zoning is consistent, but the Burbank Center Plan designation would be brought into conformance with the current general plan that would allow for a variety of commercial and residential uses as part of the downtown area.
So, all right. There's also the reference to density bonus in terms of the parking reduction, but if I'm not mistaken, the actual affordability provided doesn't meet density bonus requirements. Is that correct?
So what we said was they're proposing a parking rate that is consistent with the city's state and density bonus law parking requirement. So under the PD, they can request that reduction in parking to be closer in alignment with that particular parking rate that's on our code.
Then in terms of the request for more housing instead of hotels, because of more housing wasn't analyzed in the EIR, that's not one of the options, correct?
Well, there were project alternatives that were looked at in the environmental document that included, I believe one of them was without without the hotel.
But it was with the same amount of residential units, correct?
I don't want to speculate. Let me make sure. Is that the case, Susan? Yeah.
Yes.
It was the same number of units. So yes, they looked at something without the hotel, but when we were looking at the whole project, the fact that you have a statement of overriding consideration and finding of fact, the economics and everything else to mitigate the whole project package, including the hotel, is what makes it, from our standpoint, the reason for being able to recommend the statement of overriding considerations. It generates a revenue of 1.3 million per year in transient occupancy tax, and that goes straight to the general fund. And it's basically not restricted. So basically at that point, the council can use it for whatever its purview. So if they wanted to allocate it for future housing, they could do that. If they wanted to allocate it for street improvements, they could do that.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Hadian?
Thank you for your report. I have many questions, and if any of those questions is for applicant, please let me know.
Okay.
For parking, I have a question from the original draft EIR. If you can please look at page ES2 on the draft EIR. It mentions on under project characteristics, 1206 parkings for residential buildings, and on ES3 we have 1143 parking spaces for both buildings. And then on the final EIR, page I5, we have 857 proposed parking for both buildings. And then the project book has the same number of proposed parking versus the required parking on G0.03 that requires 1143 parkings. So on project information page for the revised entitlement, we have 1143 required and the proposed is 853, which I understand it's probably the reduction for the bonus density or
Correct. So
the plan development.
Correct. So the change to the parking reduction came after the draft environmental impact report was drafted. So that's why you will see in some cases that it refers to the original parking spaces that the applicant was proposing. And that's why it's captured in the final EIR. We were able to make that change. So the change is actually 1,168 parking spaces in total. That includes 857 parking spaces for residential. That includes the 70 guest parking spaces, 307 parking spaces for the hotel, and then 4 parking spaces for the retail component.
And then we have the guest parking reduced to by 12% on the same page, G0.03, which is less than half of what's required. So I noticed that 25% was required and now 12% is provided. Is that also what the applicant can propose as a part of their plan development?
Yes. And I would point out that as part of the state and city density bonus law, guest parking spaces are not required. So the applicant doesn't have to, if they're going for the full compliance with that law, have to provide it. But because of the location of the site and the fact that there isn't a lot of parking on street, there will be no parking, we negotiated to get them to provide the 70. So they're going from a rate of 4 parking spaces, or 1 guest parking space for every 4 units, to a rate of 1 parking space for every 8.18 units. And that puts it consistent with other cities. Glendale requires, I believe, 1 parking space for every 10 units. And then Los Angeles doesn't require any guest parking spaces. So the project would be right in the middle of that requirement.
If I can I add, Chair, just to this? I just don't want to, I want to be very clear. The project is not a density bonus project. The project is, through the plan development, is seeking to have the parking rate that would apply to a density bonus project be applied to this project. So if you look in the agenda packet, I believe it's Exhibit M, is there was a study that was done by the traffic engineering firm of Gibson, transportation consultant, and what they did is they did a market analysis to look at in surrounding areas similar types of projects and the parking requirements that were applied to them. And as a result of this, working with transportation planning, we looked at the proposed calculated numbers, looked at what it would be for a project of this type that was a density bonus type of project, and the rate that results from it is comparable to that of similar mixed-use projects in the surrounding area. So the consideration is, will the board and eventually council look at a planned development with reduced parking? The reduced parking, as I mentioned before, was one of the things, both twofold. One, it makes the units more affordable. Secondly, it looks at it in comparison to what other cities in the surrounding area have for similar type of projects, basically how they operate and what they are actually parked at. So what it does is twofold. It's telling you, yes, this will help the project from a feasibility standpoint, but at the same time, the parking standard is not just kind of pulled out of thin air. It's based on an analysis that looks at what optional requirements are. Keeping in mind that the draft EIR, the project description, the way it's designed currently in its current form is to basically have parking up to 1,400 plus. But the reality of it is that, as we've heard from some of the commenters, is do we then just bury more parking, or do we make the units more affordable? It's kind of pick your poison. Which one do you want?
My next question, thank you very much. My next question is about the bicycle parking, which is also calculated based on the 5% of the reduced parking.
Yes, correct.
So you usually count 5% of whatever has to be required, and here we count based on the reduced parking.
Correct.
Is there any parking plan with parking count per level? I looked through the plans and I didn't find anything that gives me the breakdown of the parking per floor.
This would probably be a good question for the applicant to have their architect come up and give us a breakdown of the parking spaces per level. And I will also add that for the hotel portion, we are allowing them to use some of the parking spaces as tandem and also as stacked, so that they could utilize space in a better...
Which is typical for hotel projects, sure. I can continue with my other questions while they're looking for the plan. I have a question about the parcels. For the parcels, actually, I have questions on clarification of the parcels and then questions about the entire tract map. The same project book G0.05, I see lot 1 and 2 owned as 1 APN, correct me if I'm wrong, and then lot 3 and 4 are the city-owned lots to be purchased as a part of this entitlement.
Correct.
And then there is the proposed park, the open space, which is city-owned, right?
Correct.
So the developer only does the actual landscaping work and creation of the park. They don't own the property.
Correct. They would construct the improvements and they would also maintain the improvements.
Then on C4 is the proposed site of, showing proposed site of 6.77 acres.
Board member, could we go back to G 0.05, just to clarify?
Yes.
So there's two kind of existing lots, lot 1 and 2, that are under 1 APN, 1 assessor's parcel number. The lot 3 portion, there's a portion at the rear that's kind of a triangular shaped piece. That's the part that's approximately 15, it's the part that is like a sharp triangle, yeah. That piece is 15,000 square feet. They are seeking the city's approval to buy. In other words, they would purchase that piece so that they could have fire access to the rear because it's a 26-foot wide driveway. And then there's lot 4. Lot 4 is actually city-owned land, and it would remain city-owned land. So this part that's to the right would actually be the open space area. That's 27,800.
On the plan that I have, Lot 4 is the little portion at the very end of the proposed project. This lot doesn't have a lot number, the
Yeah,
proposed part.
so that, you're right, so that's the bottom part. So this area that's above it is actually just city-owned land without a parcel number.
Perfect.
And then there's the areas in dark, and those are the areas that are to be vacated, dedicated by the developer. And then it's really hard to see, but there's a small sliver that's the 1,000 plus, and that's the area that would be vacated by the city. And then after it's all done, they would build and maintain the right-of-way improvements of 21 feet wide all the way across the front. So I just want to make sure there's a lot of moving pieces, and the area to the top is the land that's still being retained by Caltrans as part of the existing easement. So, okay.
So then on C4, proposed site is 677 acres, and is the FAR calculated based on this area, that's 6.77? The total FAR of the proposed project?
The FAR would be calculated on the site prior to the dedications and basically acquisitions of the property. So the site has a net acreage of roughly 8 acres. So the FAR was calculated on that amount.
I think I have a different number, and I think it's based on 677.
It's 677 plus the 15,000, 7.11.
So on C5, I have this C5, which seems to be the same as G005, or is it supposed to give me more information on anything? That's just a question.
So the C5 is actually the tentative track map.
The track map.
Right.
Then on C5.1, what's the meaning of these lot numbers? I know that we have the track map on C5 that will be the 4 parcels.
So this.
What are these lots?
So these lots here are the airspace parcels. So as part of the physical 4 parcels that they're creating on the ground, they're also proposing the creation of 10 airspace lots that would serve like condominium lots. So this shows you basically the location of those lots and tells you basically what they're used for.
So lots 5 and 11 at the front, at North Front Street, those are airspace lots, and the rest are buildable lots. Is that what it means?
Correct. Anything that's greater than 4 is an airspace lot. So it's basically like a condominium lot. The ground lots are the lots 1 through 4 that you saw in the previous.
Thank you.
The previous sheet.
So Board Member Hadian, what they did is they carved out, just for purposes, both the area where there's an amenity as well as a retail space. And then if you go on further, you see they provide you with kind of like a 3D model, kind of a blown up view where all the different airspace rights are kind of pulled back so you can see them as opposed to trying to see it all in 2D.
That's exactly my next question. So the lot 6 on 503, lot 6 is the vertical stack of the parking for residential 2, shown as lot 10 on C53. So when I look at the lot 10 on C53, where is lot 10? Lot 10, for example, on the second residential, below where it says phase 2, that whole lot 10 is the stack of units above lot 6, which is the parking rights. I just want to understand the 3D of
Yeah, that's the level 3 through 8 are the parking levels above it.
And then on C52, context analysis shows segments. C52. So what are these segments? These are the segments of the final track map, or these are the segments related to how the buildings will be located?
So these are again just segments showing the layout of the condominium lots. So it's a little confusing because they are proposing both ground lots, and then within those ground lots, they're also proposing the condominium lots. So this would show you basically a combination of those ground lots. And if you notice, if you look at the hotel essentially is just the ground lot too, but the residential and the parking are the ones that are broken up into the different airspace lots.
Is there one access to the entire site for all of these buildings, or would there be like separate entrances to separate portions of the buildings?
So there would be 3 main entrances along Front Street, so main lobby entries, and I believe you can get to, the parking and to the units and to the open spaces throughout the lot. So they would operate as a cohesive project, but just like when you have a planned development that consists of units on the ground, a lot of times they'll have common areas that are lots that are owned by an association. And that's where you have the walkways, you have the recreational areas, the swimming pool, stuff like that.
For
So
maintenance.
right, and it kind of operates that same way, only it's vertical instead of a horizontal configuration.
Thank you. My next question is on C53. I see lots 13 and 14. Is this one space, or to me it should be one space because it's a recreational area and the open space, amenity space lot? Why are there 2 lot numbers and separated?
That's a question for the owner. Leonard, I defer to the owner.
Yeah, we'll defer to the owner.
As far as why it's 2 or 1.
Right, yeah. That would constitute basically the rooftop amenity area, and we can have the owner explain the breakup of those 2 lots up there.
Sure.
I believe Mr. Goldsmith has a comment in reference to this.
Response, yes. Once again, for the record, Dale Goldsmith. Lots 13 and 14 are the rooftop decks space, and that space, at least in theory, could be divided between the 2 residential buildings. But as Leonard mentioned, the project will operate as a single integrated whole. This was really done for financing purposes. There'll be a reciprocal easement agreement that will ensure for access, maintenance, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll function as one. But the primary purpose of the airspace subdivision was to allow the hotel to be separately financed, because there's different pools of money for hotel financing as opposed to apartment financing. And typically with a subdivision, it's when you're not sure what's going on at the beginning, it's better to have more lots than fewer. You can always tie them together. So as a practical matter, although there's lots 13 and 14, they may well be either under the same ownership, or if they're not, it'll be tied together by a reciprocal easement agreement.
Are these 2 buildings going to be separated at some point in the future?
I don't think there's any intention to do that. Now, remember when we did the map 3 years ago, we weren't sure what the future was going to hold. And again, when you're doing a map, more the lots, the better, because you can always combine them. It's difficult to separate down the line. But the project will be operated as an integrated whole.
Thank you. And how many parcels will be on the final track map?
I think that's probably still to be determined after discussion with the city staff.
So not clear yet.
It will be either that number or fewer. It can't be more.
Thank you. And while you're here, I have questions about building height. Can I ask you those questions, or is this
Probably
for
best for the architect.
architect?
You're looking for feet and inches.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have questions about the building height for project architect, please.
Richard Solaris, Urban Architecture Lab.
Good evening.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for your project design. On C53, total elevation to the top of building is, as I put together those numbers on lot 6, the lot 6 on top of that, lot 10, I get the elevations of 13.7 feet, 10.3, and 75.2. That totals to 99.2, and does not include the height of the gym, club room at the recreational deck. And then on A3 3.02. This building section on A3.02, I noticed the maximum proposed building height is shown as 85. Would you please explain about the 14.2 feet in difference in height?
Sure. So the maximum building height that we're illustrating there, the 85 feet, is type 3 construction. So it's not really a zoning height per se, but it's just the maximum to where from average grade plane where the rooftop can be to. And then the additional height that we're talking about are overrun items such as stairs, elevator, shafts, that sort of thing that add the additional height to the 85 feet, which are typically exempt items from the particular limitation of the construction type for height. So that's the difference, is the overrun for the depending on the elevator we buy, between 12 feet to 14 feet high.
So you consider the building maximum height to be 85?
So the building as measured by building code is 85 feet, and then what we're showing is a parapet height, which is what planning typically measures building height to, between 5 and 6 feet in various levels of the project.
85
So,
to the top deck,
85
and the accessories above that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
85 feet is from finished grade to the top deck, and accessories like
It's
stairs.
a little more nuanced than that. It's from what's called average grade plane. So our site has a slight slope to it across the 1,500 feet. And so we measure from average grade plane, where it creates a line that is kind of hovering above grade. And so at one end, it's 2 feet above the natural grade, and at the other end, it's actually below natural grade, right? And so that's a constant 85-foot measurement that we have to do in order to make the building comply with building codes. For zoning code, effectively, the building is 91 feet, I guess is the simplest way to put it, because of the parapet on top of that.
I have questions about the storm drain and water table. If those are not questions that you cannot answer, I can continue with staff.
Our civil engineer is here, if he can possibly answer some of those for you.
Sure. I think maybe I should ask the staff for these questions, and then. In the project book C3.1, section C3.1 is section D, where the storm drain is. The lowest point below the pad is in about like the 550 range. C3.1, section D, the lower part where the storm drain is. It's like when you look at the measurements, is within the 550, about 20 feet below ground. And then on the draft DIR, which is the March 2019, page 4.4-1. The last paragraph says that, let me see. Based on the review of the seismic hazard zone report for Burbank, no, actually this is 4.4-1. It mentions that historically highest groundwater level in the general area is between 20 to 30 feet below the ground, beneath the ground surface. And data is collected from the early 1900s to late 1990s. Is there any update on this data within the past 30 years? Because late 1990 is like, the data is 20 years old. And I did not find the information, the Appendix F, that is is referred to in the EIR. It shows like the groundwater depth and where you took the measure for the report from other projects. I want to know what project it was near the site and how recent the data was, because this one is pretty old.
Okay. So if you look at 4.4-1 of the draft environmental impact report, the geology and soils section, there was a geotech report that was done February 12, 2016. And as part of that, there was an exploration of the groundwater. So it says here that groundwater was not encountered in the field explorations drilled to a maximum depth of 61.5 feet below the existing ground surface. So I'm not sure if that answers your questions.
No, because the building goes, the lowest point below grade is lower than the 14 or 16 feet. So I want to know how the study was done, making sure that there is no proximity to the highest level of water, underground water table, because on 4.4-4, which is 2-page after this page, it says that on the 4th paragraph, it says the liquefaction analysis for borings B1, 5, and B8 located at the northern, central, and southern portion of the site, respectively, indicate that the soil below the groundwater could be prone to less than 0.1 inch of liquefaction. So that is very important data to know what the soil is. And I did not have the analysis of the borings in my book, unless it's provided as an...
It's Appendix F to the
I
draft.
didn't
EIR.
have it. That's what I noted here. And then these are all related, so I'm going to ask my last question. On 4.4-9, last paragraph, the geotechnical study and the impact analysis shows project could result in potentially significant impacts related to liquefaction. Where is the analysis for this section? I need to see the recent water table. I need to see the lowest point below grade and the analysis for borings.
Okay, I'm going to invite our consultant to come up and see if she can field the questions. And just so I'm clear, you want to know, because there's different issues here. There's liquefaction, which is one issue. There's the issue of groundwater. And then what was the third issue that you're looking for?
Is the geotechnical information for the borings.
Okay, so let me invite our consultant to come up and see if she can explain for you.
Good evening. I'm Suzanne Huerta with Rincon Consultants. Do you have Appendix A of the document?
What page is that?
So it's Appendix A, page 32.
On the original draft EIR?
Yeah, on the draft EIR.
Page 32. Let me see.
So we do address the issue of liquefaction, again, coming from the 2016 geology report, which states that the alluvial soils below the groundwater level would be less than 1.1 inches of liquefaction, induce settlement during maximum considered earthquake ground motion, and overall found it to be less than significant. And this, again, is coming from the 2016 report, which is also Appendix F of the draft EIR.
So I didn't have any of those information. This is a different. Yeah. So the recommendation is number A3. Is that?
Yes, yes. Do we have it here. Do you want to see it? Okay.
And the recommendation is that there is no risk, or there will be risk, but could be mitigated and to be avoided.
So, it does, in the initial study, we do acknowledge that there is a potential risk, and so under impact GO1 in the draft DIR, we go through, we acknowledge that there is that potential risk, and it's there are design features that are included in the geology study that are incorporated as project design features. And with incorporation of those design features into the project, that is where we found that the impacts would be less than significant. And there's a list. So on page 4.4-10 of the draft EIR lists all the design features that would be required as part of the project.
4.4, thank you. 4.4 dash?
Dash 10. And yeah. Carries over to 4.4-11.
Yes, I have it. Yes. So the impact GO1?
Yes.
How is this risk being mitigated?
So if you look on 4.4-11, there's a number of measures that are included there. So it looks into the footings so there are specific requirements for the footings that would accounts for the allowable bearing capacity. It looks at the soil bearing pressure. I'm sorry, I'm not a geologist, but there are a number of measures there that would address these issues.
Thank you. My next question is for staff. This is again about FAR. We discussed that the net lot is 6.77 acre, and the total building area on project summary, as shows on the project summary, is 859,223 square feet, which is if each acre is 43,560, it will end up to 19.72 acres. And this 1972 acres divided by 677 will give me 291. This is the proposed FAR.
Which sheet are you referring to?
G0.03. That's where the lot.
Okay, so
lot area is shown as
okay, so
on the top left.
Okay, so the existing site information. So the lot area, there's a gross area of 8.9 acres, which is 352,297 square feet, and then a gross of 6.77 acres. I would like to clarify that this does not include the additional 15,000 square feet of land that the applicant looks to acquire from the city, and that will be considered with council. So that would bring that total to 7.11 acres. Now, when we look at FAR for the project, we only count the FAR for the hotel and the retail portion. We don't count any of the residential portions of the building as FAR. that portion would go for the dwelling units per acre.
It does include the site on page C4.0. It does include everything. The 8 acre, I think, included the easement.
Correct.
The Caltrans easement, which was excluded, and the remaining, including everything, hotel and all buildings, it's 677. So the FAR was correctly counted on the 6.77. My question is that the final FAR will be the proposed FAR is 2.91 based on the total building size divided by the lot size.
Correct.
So,
but only including the hotel portions and the retail. We don't count the residential square footage in FAR.
So just to clarify, Board Member Harian, there's a policy within the city's general plan that specifically separates the residential square footage and applies a density to that versus other square footages like for commercial and industrial. So I think that's where the conflict is. You're right. There's a total tabulation of square footage, and you're looking at that in general and saying this is all the floor area. But in the general plan, there's actually a policy that excludes it from the calculation when we're looking at the 2.5 that's allowed under the Burbank Center plan and the overall density of units. So there's two different calculations that occur. And in the staff report, that's why it noted a considerably lower FAR calculation, because it's only accounting for the retail space and not the other square footages, which basically in essence get absorbed into hotel keys, density, and parking area. And those don't get counted in FAR.
So
And that's under general plan policy.
But the applicant has noted 2.9.
Well, I understand.
So they did the same calculation that I did, building versus land.
But the important part is their calculation is not the same thing that the planning
that
staff
city
uses
does.
to comply with the code.
While you're answering that question, I have another question. FAR calculation on draft EIR, page 4.8-11. This is policy 1.2, 4.8-11. On that page, we have a 0.61 FAR based on existing zoning. Is that based on like the auto dealership? So if they wanted to develop just a mixed use over this lot as is, they would get only 0.65 FAR. Or what is this FAR? The project would have an overall FAR
That's
of
just the
0.60.
retail space. Yeah.
Again, it would be if they were coming in and doing a commercial only project, then they would be basically limited to the 2.5 FAR, which is what the general plan restricts the FAR in that land use designation to. But again, because this is a mixed use project, the only portions that would get counted towards the FAR would be the commercial portions that exclude the parking. So it would be the hotel square footage and the retail square footage. The residential portion would be counted as part of the density. So the general plan has an overall density allowance of 87 units to the acre. So this project site here would be developed at 84 units per acre. So it's a little confusing, but the way, as Fred mentioned, the policy is to count them separately, and that's how we've done it for all the other mixed-use projects that have come through.
So the FAR for the commercial is the area of the commercial versus the lot size.
Correct.
And the density is total number of the residential area versus the lot size?
The density is just the number of units at 87 or 84 dwelling units per acre. So it's really the number of units you can get based on the size of the lot.
So the lot size is like the common denominator between calculation of both commercial ones and the density?
Correct.
Got it, thank you. And, okay, so that answers my next question, that how the density and FAR is being calculated. Then I have a question about traffic, so that would be for traffic. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Hannah Wu. I'm here with CDD Transportation, and I can take your questions about traffic.
Good evening. Thank you for your report. I have a question on the draft EIR 4.12-25 that looks at the intersection of I-5. 25. Okay, so it looks into different intersections and assessment of traffic of different on-ramp and off-ramps, but which one is assessment for the on-ramp and the off-ramp and on-ramp at Verduga exit, which is right next to the project site?
Sorry, just a second.
I see number 8 is I-5 northbound off-ramp to Burbank Boulevard. Number 9 is I-5.
I'm sorry, could
off-ramp.
you repeat your question?
Yes, my question is
4.12 page.
4.12-25, that there is a table. The table is the project intersection level of service analysis that looks into different intersections near or with close proximity to the project. For that intersection that when you take 5 south and you exit Vertigo, which one is the analysis for that?
So, let's see.
We do have the First Street, IKEA Way, and Verdugo. We have South Front Street and I-5.
Yes, that would be the
southbound.
south intersection number 22, South Front Street and I-5 southbound ramps. That would be the Verdugo exit.
So the off-ramp.
Correct.
The off-ramp, but is there any, that's on-ramp. So which one is the off-ramp?
We studied both the on and off ramps.
Oh, so it's for both ramps?
Yes.
And it doesn't show significant because there's going to be this project with the traffic impact. How come this is not significant? How is it not significant, but the on-ramp and off-ramp at 5 and Burbank Boulevard are considered significant?
So the table that you're currently looking at is existing an existing plus project. So we are comparing the existing condition as it is today without the project, and then existing plus the project is the existing street grid system, and then adding the project as it's proposed. And so based on the intersection counts that we've taken for the project, it showed that there was not a significant impact shown at intersection number 22, which is the Verdugo on and off ramps. And then for southbound off ramp, Front and Burbank, it did show an impact.
Yes, and when you mentioned that about the projects impacting those intersections, it means completed plan developments or entitlements, because on 3-2, I see a list of projects, and this is March 2000, the draft report was prepared on March 2019. I think it doesn't have the 2 more recent projects, which we need to consider. So the cumulative impact should include the Avion and the Cedar projects. I didn't see that as a part of the projects.
At 3-2, so you're looking at
3-2 and 3-3 is the cumulative project list that looks into the projects impacting the intersections or any impact that's considered in this draft environmental impact report. I don't see Avion project and Cedar project as a part of these projects, and I don't see IKEA.
So
that's also a plan development.
So the cumulative projects list that we use in order to assume the future growth of the city is analyzed in that project list. 601 Cedar was not included because it did not meet the significance threshold for that we established as a city to analyze traffic studies. So the project list that you see in the cumulative projects list are those that require a traffic study or are currently entitled. So at the time that this project was currently applied for, it's like a snapshot in time. We look at the projects that are currently in the queue and account for those types of projects.
I think I'm afraid I do not agree with you because the last paragraph on page 3-2 says CEQA requires cumulative impact analysis in EIRs to consider either a list of planned and pending projects that may contribute to cumulative effects for a forecast for future development potentials. And if we do not consider pending projects, then how come Premier at first is included? I think this list needs to be revised. At the time they prepared that, they didn't have recent information.
So 601 Cedar is included in the ambient growth. There's an assumption that we use as a growth factor for ambient growth throughout the city, where we assume the growth that the general plan studied as our base. And so those types of projects, although they're not in the cumulative projects list, they are still added within our model to assume that type of growth in the future. I'm sorry, which project are you saying? Could you repeat which other project?
Premier at first is included while it's not entitled, and Avion, Cedar were entitled, they're not included. And IKEA is also a considerable project with considerable traffic impact. That's not included.
So Avion is actually included in the related projects list. It is number 8.
Number 8. So
yes,
Avion is included. Thank you
It's called
very
the
much.
Overton Moore project.
And is this list the same or updated in the final EIR? I tried to look it up. But
Yes, the project list that you see should match the final EIR.
Also, IKEA was already open, so it was already assumed in the counts for this study. IKEA was approved in 2014, and it was already operational. So it wouldn't be in a future projects list, it would be part of the existing traffic study.
So this list is incoming projects, incoming impacts, but not happened yet. Is that potential?
Correct.
You know what's causing some confusion, I think, is the names of the projects. So when you reference the old IKEA, it's the Burbank Town Center project. So the names that were used in that snapshot in time accounted for Premier, accounted for Overton Moore, which is Avion, and accounted for the Burbank Town Center project. The Cedar project that you're referring to, the 46 units, the confusion I think that's occurring is that it didn't hit the threshold as a separate project by itself, but when they looked at the ambient growth of the general plan, it was already analyzed as part of that process. So they're not going to carve it out as a one-off project and analyze it. They analyzed it cumulatively as part of the whole analysis. So all the projects that you mentioned were all analyzed in the environmental document.
So you did not consider those that were already built, like the new IKEA building?
It's in there. It's in
the report.
Yes.
The impact is included in the report.
The impact that was projected was
projected.
included.
But for the cumulative, if it is built, you already included that, or you're looking at it
That's
as a
future plus
potential?
project.
Because Talaria is also built, but is considered as cumulative
It's
project
part of it,
list.
yeah.
So if a project's built and operating, it's implicitly included because it's now in the traffic that we actually measured when we went out to intersections and counted cars. So what the cumulative project list is for all the projects that we may have entitled, but we haven't built yet, or that may be under construction, but are otherwise not actually operating. So Talaria is in the cars that we counted on the street in the existing conditions. IKEA, same thing. They're in the traffic count, so they're included. So they're part of the baseline.
Still, I'm confused that when you do the calculation, you're saying, okay, these buildings are built, we know the count, let's include it in our calculation. And we have projects that are incoming in pipeline, and they will have impact. So this list shows which one, because it includes projects that are built, are entitled, and are pending. What is this list?
So for projects that are operating, that's in the existing plus project scenario. So that's when we're looking at the existing projects that are operating, all of the traffic that's happening on the street today that we measure, and then we're adding this project to see what increment and what impact there may be. That's the existing plus project scenario. Future plus project scenario is existing traffic, all the existing projects that are already built and operating, plus the project from the traffic from that list, the cumulative projects traffic. And then for the Cedar project, the small ones, we do an ambient growth on top of all of that, which is a % of the general plan growth that we also account for. That's future conditions, and then we're adding the project's traffic to see if there are impacts under that scenario.
And the calculation is based on the traffic impact of these projects after their completion, not during the construction, not while they're being built.
After they're completed, we're looking to see, we're forecasting all of that traffic when everything's built. We even include a bunch of the studios, which we know are going to be built over a long period of time. We actually front load all the studio traffic on top of it in that future forecast. So I would say the future plus project is very conservative. We're adding lots of traffic from developments that in reality are probably still further out to be built, but we're adding it all up at the horizon year so that we can be as most conservative as possible.
And is there any distinction in your calculation that shows existing versus cumulative, or they have just included them as one number under?
It's the two scenarios. So it's existing plus project scenario is existing, and then future plus project scenario is all of the entitled and unbuilt projects and general plan projects.
Thank you.
And so CEQA requires we look at both.
Thank you very much. I have a question about housing for staff.
Thank you.
I have a question about the 12,000 units within the next 15 years. And actually, this could be a question for you because I was watching the housing presentation for City Council on October 15, I believe. And Mr. Ramirez mentioned about 7,800 units built already towards this goal, including ADUs. What is the updated status? I might be wrong, but what is the updated status on the total number of the units as of now? We need 12,000.
So let me.
Sorry.
Oh, please, Chair.
Ms. Hadian, I think we need to concentrate on this project versus the general housing, I guess, goals of the city and what has been accomplished, what we're trying to do. As far as this project, do you have a question about the
Yes.
housing units that are being built here?
Yes, my question would be that if we do not have the entire 12,000 units, then a part of the presentation they included that this study is about 5% of the units or a percentage. Is that on the net 12,000 or the remaining of that? How many we have? How many we have to have? And what number of units this project will provide?
So let me clarify. I think there's a couple of things that might be kind of merging together. During the presentation that you're referring to, we referenced the presentation that happened earlier on that night that was done by the Southern California Association of Governments representative. And what they've done is they've run a model, and they're saying that the estimates are that for the next housing cycle, which is the next 8-year cycle that starts in 2021, that they're projecting that our RHNA number, our regional housing need assessment allocation, is going to be along the lines of 7,800 to 8,000 units. So when the council says, let's have a visionary goal of 12,000 units in the next 15 years, it's in line with that projected development, because if you think about it, in the next 15 years, we'll have 2 housing cycles. So even if they're 7,800, conceivably, that would put us at 12,000 or more units that we have to build to meet our obligation. What the developer was referring to is that if we looked at the next 15 years and looked at trying to build 12,000 units and divided that by the number of years, they're projecting whatever 800 units that have to be built. And what they're saying is, if this gets built next year, this would go towards that percentage of that number that would be built if you were doing on a regular clip. But that's speculative, but it's basically just saying if we broke them out evenly over 15 years, this is what it is. I can tell you, though, that our housing production has been horrible over the last housing cycle. We've built basically, before I got here, we had built like about 55 units in the span of basically 4 to 5 years. Most recently, we built Teleria. Teleria provided us with 241 units, I think. And then you recently approved First Street Village at the council level. That hasn't been built yet, but we've entitled 275 units, 261 market rate, and only 5% moderate, because they were in the same boat. They were basically coming in when Palmer wasn't applicable. And then this would be the third project if you include, well, actually it's the fourth project, the third one being Cedar, and that's only 46 units. And so when you look at it, we've entitled, almost 400 units, but the reality of it is that we've only built the 55 previously and the 241 units at Teleria. So when you look at that, and our obligation is 2684, I believe, or thereabouts, under the current cycle that's about to end next year, we can expect to see a lot more requirements in housing. This project, as I mentioned before, is not a cure-all, but it goes towards that total count. But yeah, we have a long road ahead of ourselves. We need to update our Burbank Center plan, and we need to update the Golden State specific plan to accommodate housing. This project is, hopefully no one assumes that this is touting it as the fix. This is just one of the many projects that have to be considered for to build the housing units that we need.
Thank you very much. And my second question in housing, what is the ratio of very low, or moderate in the 15% or any inclusionary regulation that we have to provide? Is there a specific ratio of each level of income?
They're provided, so the state is going to give the Southern California Association of Governments, the planning organization, they're going to give them a number. I believe the last number was 1.3 million units need to be built. Of that, SCAG then is going to assign, Southern California Association of Governments is going to assign a certain percentage of what they call fair share to every municipality and county. And that number then will be broken out. In the past, the breakout of those percentages has been 40, 20, 40 inclusive of very low and low, 20 of moderate, and 40 of above market. But that's not to say that's the number, but that's what it's been in the past. And we're not going to see what that allocation percentage is going to be until late next year.
Thank you very much. I have one last question, and it's about the alternatives. Other alternatives included in the environmental impact report. The 4 alternatives of no project, existing zoning, no hotel, and reduced density. On alternative 4, the impact will go less than significant by, let's say, 97 or 70% reduction in the project scale. And the alternatives 1 to 3 were rejected because would not achieve most of the project objective. But alternative 4 reduces the traffic, also would meet most of the project objectives. Did applicant provide an alternative 4 in terms of like complete set of drawings, how the project will look like with the reduced density design? Or it was just assumed that if the project reduced, will have less than significant impacts? I just want to know if actual project was designed and shared with the community, with public at the community meetings.
The alternatives analysis is not conducted in the same level of detail under CEQA. It's done more of a qualitative comparison. There are some numbers, and staff can go into that, but it's not the same level of analysis.
So to answer partially your question is they didn't draw a whole new project alternative conceptual design and have community meetings for it.
So the reduction was considered based on the proposed project as
so what
reduction
they do is,
for alternative 4.
So what they do is they provide different numbers, the reduction alternative, and then those get analyzed. They get run through the same models to analyze those as far as order of magnitude. But they do not, for each alternative, they don't like present in front of us a brand new project with a different building envelope. It just says, okay, what if the unit count was dropped? What if this particular piece of the project was removed? And then they model and analyze that part of it.
Thank you very much. My last question is about LEED Gold certification. Is this mandatory for projects going above a certain square footage, or is it additional and applicant wants to provide LEED Gold?
This is both something that the city was looking to do as part of the greenhouse gas reduction plan, and it's also something that the applicant has from the beginning proposed that they want to meet.
So the proposed project includes both Cal Green and LEED Gold?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? I have one question of staff. Actually, a question to the architect, Mr. Solares. You've designed this project, is that correct?
Yes.
Looking at some of the renditions, it's just a comment.
Okay.
I do like the way you've done the residential portion.
Mm-hmm.
Why have you selected? I know there's beauty in simplicity. Why have you selected such a flat type of a design for your hotel? There are some articulations, and I appreciate that. There are some elements that are incorporated in there, but you see, and the color scheme, I recognize all that, but why the box type where the windows are just kind of like fixed to the wall? And
So by nature, the hotel rooms are very repetitive, and the rooms windows on center are very regular, and so that kind of lends itself toward a more kind of simplistic, if you will, or kind of clean modern design. And so we kind of try to embrace that, and so we have two different versions of that, one facing Front Street and the other facing the freeway, and the freeway one does break up and begin to articulate that same window break up even more, but doing that around both sides, our personal opinion was it was going to be too much.
Well, you can't see both sides at the same time.
I know.
Okay, all right. And last question, Mr. Krisky. It's about the traffic. Front Street is somewhat narrow, and it's only 2 lanes going back and forth. During the project, and I'm not sure if I should be directing this question to you, perhaps to the project owner, but during the project, what safeguards are going to be in place to make sure that the current commuters are not hindered by the construction process?
You're talking about during construction?
During construction, yes. Well, obviously, after construction, you have 3 driveways, people going in and out. But during construction, there's going to be a lot of trucks going back and forth. And I've already experienced some of the, difficulties where trucks trying to access the property, there's a line of 14, 15 cars behind them trying to get to the train station.
Yes, so all I can say is that we, as part of the environmental review, and I think as part of the conditions of approval, our Public Works Department needs to approve any haul routes or any construction activity in and out of the site to make sure that it doesn't impact or minimizes impacts to existing commuter traffic. I know our Public Works Department will be very mindful, depending upon how this project fits in with the freeway project, to make sure that that all works. So it'll be analyzed at the time that they come to the city to pull permits for construction. And they'll have to produce a plan that shows where their trucks are going to be routed, what the haul routes are, and hopefully how it doesn't interfere with circulation patterns.
I can add to that. I see a little bit of, he wants a little more. So the construction management plan that is required of them, which is kind of, since I got here, it's a lot more extensive than what happened in the past. So we were all out there on the tour, and we saw Caltrans in action, which I don't want to say that's a good example of how to manage a construction site, but nonetheless, it was happening. But if you notice, there was no flagman at the entrance. There was nobody, watching for traffic. Trucks were basically just, looking left or right and then heading out of the facility. So what they actually have to provide is a detailed truck route that shows how they're coming in from where they're coming into the building. They have to show to the property, have to show circulation, and they also have to abide by the best management practices for basically how they cycle and route the trucks in and out of the property. So actually having people at the entrances flagging, and if they need to, they can stop traffic to allow the trucks to enter and exit. All that has to be analyzed before they actually get a building permit. So just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Thank you. I have
And
a
that's
question.
mitigation measure T6 in your report.
I have a question for Mr. Goldsmith. Mr. Goldsmith, we are in receipt of your November 4, 2019 letter. November 4 is today.
Yes.
Is there a reason why you waited until today to present us with these changes?
Yes, we didn't get the staff report until late Friday. It was hundreds of pages. They weren't redlined. There was a lot of stuff out of place, and I spent most of yesterday and most of today going through them, and we only came up with 3 rather minor points, but we would have done it early if we could have.
Thank you very much. Anything further? I now declare the hearing closed, and the planning board will now deliberate. What is the planning board's pleasure? No one wants to go first? Ms. Lu?
First thing is, I just want to thank staff for all the hard work that you've done these past several years. I know that they're in the midst of a hiring freeze and staff turnover, and the fact that you've been able to put so much work into this is really commendable. So I really want to thank you for that work. And for applicant, thank you so much for your work too, and for being open to negotiating with staff about changes, and for investing in the city of Burbank. I really appreciate that you have brought this project forward. It's beautiful. And I think that in terms of your goals of connectivity, sustainability, and building neighborhoods, that you really met those goals. And for those reasons, I am supportive of this project.
Mr. Gamboa?
I'd like to echo those comments for the staff. You did a great job with the reports, very thorough. I think your findings were solid and everything looks in order. The project is a nice project. It looks fine. The amenities that are added to the neighborhood are great. The great public benefit, a lot of them are kind of things you're going to need anyway to market your building next to a freeway and between a freeway and a train track. So it's kind of mutually beneficial. I'm a little disappointed that we couldn't match our affordable housing requirements in terms of percentages, in terms of rates, in terms of distribution. They're all the smallest units. In fact, it's called out in the development agreement. They will be the smallest units. I'd rather see less parking and maybe a few more units to max out the density to get some few very low income. I think it's underparked in terms of bicycle parking. There's 43 units. That's roughly 20 families that live in a 573 unit building. So you can do more to help mitigate traffic, greenhouse gas, take advantage of all the connections that this will have. But considering what we're working against and the environment we're working in, I think it's a pretty good project. But if there's a way to squeeze in a few more of those units that are restricted, there's one guy I see every day at the Metrolink station. He lives in North Hollywood. He's on a fixed income. He lives in a rent stabilized unit. Rent keeps going up. He's about $1,100 a month for a studio. So he wouldn't qualify for this because he doesn't make enough money either. But he's the type of person who's really valuable to the community because he's a good guy to have around. So those are the people, whether on the fixed incomes that are aging in place, or there are support workers who are working in our cleaners, our admin, the people who need places to live nearby. The young professionals that can afford the moderate income, they're going to double up and live in apartments until they make it. So there's room for those folks and studios, but we need room for affordable families, affordable family housing. So I'm disappointed we don't have that. And what it sounds like from city attorney is that or from the staff is that we're lucky that we got that. So, it's something.
Ms. Hadian?
Thank you very much to staff and the applicant. I have made notes of all discussions, and I reviewed all comments, letters in support and opposing the proposed project. Majority of the comments opposing the project as proposed considered the following items as negative environmental impact: traffic, air pollution, greenhouse gas emission, modeling and monitoring, housing, particularly the affordable housing part of the project, and density, with about less than 5% of the letters and comments considering the project site not a right fit for the proposed project. I also reviewed all plans, reports and presentations, and I consider the project challenging in different areas, as mentioned, and they are all directly related to the project scale. And beyond all environmental impacts that the proposed project will potentially have, it needs more work to meet the Burbank 2035 general plan, especially goal 3, community design and character, and especially with regards to the policies 3.3 through 4.1-9, policies 3.3, 4, and 5. And also the project impacts and mitigation measures. Item 3, project consistency with applicable aesthetic and aesthetic-related policies. Goal 2, policy 2.3, and plan development design review criteria. Again, aside from project design, EIR report, and comments, I would ask myself these questions. Can I support a development at this site? Yes. Do I agree with the mix of proposed land uses, hotel and residential? Yes. Do I agree with the scale of the proposed project? No, including FAR and density. Do I agree with the overall project design, the segmented buildings, configuration, and their interrelationship? No. But the project also offers outstanding features, including pedestrian circulation, vehicular access, Metrolink access through Magnolia Boulevard, design material colors used for the hotel portion of the project, public open space, privately maintained, and no parking along the front street, and providing a lot of improvements. However, all these features are not being seen because of the adverse environmental impacts the project creates. CEQA and its 13 guidelines used for EIR are just the basic and minimum requirements. CEQA is not even complete, I think, when its guidelines do not look at reverse impacts of the environment onto the project and its residents. Impacts such as noise, air quality, and more. I'm really not sure how future residents of the proposed building will enjoy fresh air when they open their windows to the Freeway 5. It's just 26 feet from the edge of freeway to the face of the building, which is about 9 meters, and it is not a large distance. We can do better than that. And by reducing the project scale, the buildings will automatically become smaller and sit away from the freeway. We know that we need to meet our housing goals. We know that the site is suitable for a TOD, transit-oriented development. We know that the developers need to meet at least their minimum anticipated return on investment. But with all that, it is health, safety, and welfare of the people we must keep in mind. I believe that designers of the project are capable of revising the design to reflect a mindful approach, and that brings the impacts to less than significant, with more engagement of the community, similar to the community meetings for the development at the old IKEA site. For all these reasons, I'm unable to support the project as proposed, but I do support a development at that site.
Vice Chair Rosati?
Thank you. Thank you for staff and the applicant and the years of work that has gone on behind the scenes. I'm going to say that I'm happy after 30 years that somebody's going to take a gamble on this site, that someone believes in the city of Burbank and wants to invest their dollars here. I think it's really easy to criticize and say, "Oh, I don't want a hotel. I don't." But it's not our dollar. It's not our money. You have to be able to understand that in order for someone to come to our city and wants to build a project, and have an affordable housing element that they didn't have to provide, but at the same time they have to turn a dollar. They have to make money. That's part of the give and take. There are $33 million in benefits to our city. I looked at that list 4 or 5 times. It's outstanding. I haven't seen anything like it since I've been in the seat and watching city council meetings. You have this adds to our housing stock, which we have put off woefully for decades, which led us to the problem that we're in. You have units that are $1,400 a month, where you can't find anywhere in Burbank that I know of. You have open space, dedicated open space and parks, bikeways. I thought the design was very thoughtful, and I think it was very important that we took the tour and talked to the architect about the way they positioned the courtyards and the plazas and those items away from the freeway and buffered them with buildings to lessen the sound and some of the other impacts that were noted. It's a green building, LEED Gold. It's under density. I think all the way around, I don't know how much more really we could ask for. We can ask for the again, if it's not our dollar, we can ask for a lot of things. But at the same time, I think we have to understand that these guys are coming to our city as an investment, and they also have to make money. At some point, if the project's not feasible, then they're just going to go away. And what do we get stuck with? We get stuck with big box stores that really doesn't help the community, doesn't benefit the community, and doesn't help our housing issues. So I'm certainly in support of this project. Thank you.
I think Mr. Ramirez summarized the project itself by saying that this is not the answer to all. I think it was something to that effect. We cannot look at a project and try and apply every single thing that we would like to happen in the universe on a single project. It doesn't happen. So every project has its pluses, every project has its minuses. That's just the way it is. That's how life is. So in that regard, the project brings a lot to the table. Now, does it bring everything that everyone wants? Obviously not. Does it bring what the developer wants, everything the developer wants? I'm certain it doesn't. Doesn't bring everything that the city wants? Probably not. But it's a sort of a compromise between a party who wants to develop a parcel of land that's been vacant for a while and a party who would like to see that parcel developed. Now, let's face it, if this was such a hot piece of property, you think it would have stayed vacant for the number of years that it did? It's a challenging piece of property. Let's not fool ourselves. So in that regard, I think I'm not here to I'm not working for the developer. I don't work for the developer. I represent the citizens of the city of Burbank, and I hope that the decisions made here, not hope, I trust and I know that it's in the benefit of the citizens of Burbank. So we need to take more of a, I don't like the word global, but let's use it, a global approach. Sure, there are deficiencies, but there are many pluses. So in that regard, I think the developer succeeded in putting together some sort of a package that makes economical sense for them. And obviously, it also makes sense for the citizens because that property will be developed, it will be maintained, it will bring much needed housing, and it will add features that the property currently does not have. The other day we had a meeting here in reference to carbon emissions and controlling carbon emissions and reducing it and so forth and so on. And I asked the question, how is the carbon emissions policy reconciled with the housing requirements that we're facing? Because how do you address 128,000 visitors or people coming to a city to work where there isn't enough housing to accommodate them? Are we going to be able to accommodate 128,000 workers that come into Burbank to work? Probably not. We cannot build that many units to accommodate all of them. But as Mr. Ramirez noted, which is very important and critical, is in the past 4 or 5 years, we've added 55 units, absent those large projects, which were in the hundreds. So something has to give here. Something has to start working, and we need to put things in process so that we can go forward and not wonder about every single aspect of every single thing that could possibly go wrong or right, or we should add or we should deduct. So I think I've said too much already. So with that, I'm in support of the project going forward. And I do want to point out that the motion made will have to include senior plan. Is it correct that we need to include also your comments in the beginning referencing B9, B10, B93, condition 272, and the changes to the resolution, pages A10 and A11? Would that be correct?
Correct.
All right, so in that light, the motion would have to include the sections that I've just cited. Now, I do want to put to the board the letter that we received and the changes, and Mr. Goldsmith explained to us why we received this letter today. Obviously, we can't consider it at this time in the sense that we don't have enough information, but I believe the comment was, or the suggestion was, that we would leave that up to the, instead of just referencing the departments, I think perhaps we should say that we will approve, or the recommendation, if there's enough votes, with all appropriate departments having an input. Would that be satisfactory?
So that we could determine technical feasibility
Correct.
of the requested changes.
So all appropriate departments that need to address this, I don't want to say, well, this department or that department, all appropriate departments that need to address the items listed in Mr. Goldsmith's November 4, 2019 letter is also going to be a part of this motion going forward as a recommendation to the City Council, provided we have the votes. So, at this time, someone like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move that the Planning Board adopt a resolution of the Planning Board of the City of Burbank recommending City Council approve a resolution certifying the final environmental impact report, FEIR, approving the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, MMRP, with statement of overriding considerations and findings of fact, approving an amendment to the Burbank Center Plan, land use designation, development review, tentative track map number 74896, adoption of an ordinance providing for a planned development number 17-1265, and 10-year development agreement with related entitlements for the planned development 777 North Front Street project, project number 17-001265, with the amendments that were read into the record for Exhibits A and B, and in addition to having the applicant's request for conditions of approval be considered by the appropriate city departments.
Have a second?
Second.
If we can get a roll call vote, Griselda?
All those in favor? Well, actually,
Yeah, just.
yes.
Board Member Gamboa,
Yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Atikunian,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rosati,
Yes.
Board Member Hadian.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
What do we have here? At this time, we have oral communication. Anyone who would like to make a comment can fill out one of these cards. No one's coming up to the podium, all right? Any reports?
No reports, Chairperson.
Okay. Good. That makes me. All right, and we're going to take up the meetings at the minutes at the next meeting. Planning board members may introduce new items, for discussion, but no action may be taken at this time, except placed item on a future. Would you like to place an item on a future agenda, Vice Chair Rosati?
Excuse me, at some point, could we get a report on our single-family home guideline and see just how we're doing? I know that you guys are strapped, but
It's a fair request.
yeah.
Is it possible to have that sometime early January?
Based on the training that I participated in with many of you, we will agendize it for a future meeting, the earliest future meeting possible.
All right, any city planner comments, Mr. Ramirez?
Just thank you for attending a lot of meetings, a lot of special meetings. There's an upcoming meeting on the 18th, I believe, where we have items for your consideration to do the other city business that we have to do. So thank you very much. Just looking forward to that, and hopefully after that you can all have your Thanksgiving break before we start you back up in December.
And,
so thank you.
Mr. Gamboa?
At some future meeting, can we get an update on the transition to VMT analysis and EAR?
I will talk to David, our Assistant Director for Transportation Planning. I'm pretty sure he'd be more than willing to give you an update.
Great.
Sure.
And I remiss to thank the senior planner, planning staff, city attorney, and all those who participated today. So with that, see you November 18th.